Mara Lawson thought the hardest thing she'd ever done was walking away from Victor Hale with a lie that shattered them both. She told her husband, the most dangerous man she'd ever known, that she'd ended their pregnancy, watching something die in his eyes as she destroyed him to save their child. For 6 months, she'd hidden in plain sight, built a new life, carried their daughter in secret. Until one ordinary afternoon when fate made a liar of her carefully constructed world, and the truth became impossible to hide beneath her coat. Sometimes the lies we tell to survive become the very thing that exposes us. If you want to see how a single moment can unravel 6 months of carefully built deception, stay with me until the end. Hit that like button and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I love seeing how far these stories travel. The winter rain came down in sheets across Seattle's waterfront district, turning the cobblestone streets into mirrors that reflected the gray sky. Mara Lawson stood beneath the awning of a small bookstore, one hand pressed protectively over her swollen belly, the other clutching a paper bag of groceries she'd just purchased from the corner market. 7 months pregnant and counting down the weeks until she could finally hold her daughter, she'd grown comfortable in her new life, comfortable enough to let her guard down. That was her first mistake. The second was believing that a city of 700,000 people could keep her hidden forever. She adjusted her oversized coat, one of 3 she'd purchased specifically to hide her pregnancy, and stepped out into the rain. The bus stop was only 2 blocks away. 2 blocks through weather that kept most people indoors, that kept the streets relatively empty. She'd walked this route a dozen times without incident, moving through her carefully constructed routine with the precision of someone who understood that survival lived in the details. Mara had learned to be invisible. She'd changed everything. Her name, her hair color, her entire existence. Charlotte Hayes now, at least according to the driver's license she'd purchased from a forger in Tacoma 3 weeks after she'd fled. Charlotte Hayes, administrative assistant at a medical supply company, renting a 1-bedroom apartment in a building where nobody asked questions as long as the rent cleared on time. 6 months of careful planning. 6 months of looking over her shoulder. 6 months of maintaining the fiction that had saved her life. The lies she'd told Victor still haunted her dreams. The look on his face when she'd said the words, cold, clinical, devastating, played on repeat in her quiet moments. I ended it, she'd told him, standing in the marble foyer of the mansion they'd shared, her suitcase already packed. The pregnancy. It's done. We're done. She'd watched something fundamental break inside him. Victor Hale, who'd built an empire on ruthlessness and control, who commanded fear from men twice his size, had stood frozen as she'd dismantled him with 6 words. She'd needed him to believe it, needed him to let her go without following, without questioning, without discovering that she was carrying the one thing he'd always wanted and never thought he'd have. A child. Their child. The daughter growing inside her, kicking against her ribs as Mara hurried through the rain. She'd done it to save them both. The threat had been explicit, delivered by someone she'd trusted, someone close enough to Victor's organization to know exactly how to hurt him. Accidents happen to pregnant women, the voice had said over the phone, calm and measured, especially ones married to men who make enemies. You disappear, or the baby disappears, your choice. So she'd chosen. She'd lied to the man she loved and walked away from everything she'd known. Mara was half a block from the bus stop when she saw the black sedan. It stood out against the gray afternoon, idling at the curb with its engine running and its windows tinted dark enough to hide whoever sat inside. Not unusual for this part of the city. Plenty of people drove expensive cars through the waterfront district. But something about it made her stomach tighten with instinct she'd learned to trust. She adjusted her trajectory, angling toward the opposite side of the street, keeping her face down and her pace steady. Don't run. Running attracted attention. Running suggested you had something to hide. The sedan's door opened. Mara's breath caught as a tall figure emerged, unfolding from the back seat with the kind of controlled grace that belonged to someone who'd spent years training their body to be a weapon. Dark suit, perfectly tailored, broad shoulders that she'd traced with her fingers on countless nights. Hair that curled slightly at his collar when it grew too long, just beginning to show threads of silver at his temples. Victor. She froze mid-step, her heart hammering so violently she thought it might crack her ribs. This couldn't be happening. Seattle was 3 states away from the city where they'd met, where they'd married, where she'd fled. She'd been so careful. Changed her appearance, her habits, her entire existence. How had he found her? For a moment, she thought about running anyway. The bus stop was close. She could make it, lose herself in the crowd, disappear into the maze of streets she'd memorized for exactly this scenario. Then Victor turned and their eyes met across the rain-soaked street. The recognition was instant, mutual, devastating. She watched his gaze travel from her face down to where her coat bulged unmistakably, where no amount of oversized fabric could hide the truth of what she'd been concealing for 6 months. His expression didn't change. Victor had spent too many years controlling his reactions to show shock openly, but something shifted in his eyes. Something that looked like betrayal and grief and fury all compressed into a single moment of understanding. Mara's hand moved instinctively to her belly, a protective gesture she couldn't suppress. Victor's jaw tightened. Then he started walking toward her. She should have run. Every survival instinct she possessed screamed at her to move, to put distance between them, to protect herself and the baby from whatever confrontation was about to unfold. But her feet stayed rooted to the wet cobblestones as he crossed the street with long, purposeful strides. Mara. His voice cut through the rain, low and controlled. The way he said her name, not Charlotte, not whatever identity she'd been hiding behind, confirmed that her carefully constructed fiction had just shattered. Victor. She hated how her voice shook. How did you find you? He stopped 3 feet away, close enough that she could see the muscle jumping in his jaw, the tension radiating through his shoulders. Does it matter? The rain soaked through her coat. She could feel it seeping into her bones, or maybe that was just the fear. You shouldn't be here. Neither should you. You told me. He stopped himself, his gaze dropping again to her belly. You told me you ended it. I did what I had to do. You lied. The words came out flat, emotionless, but she could hear the fury underneath. Victor had built his reputation on being the one who controlled information, who saw through deception, who always knew when someone was playing him. She'd made him a fool, and they both knew it. Mara lifted her chin. Yes. For 6 months. Yes. While carrying my child. She flinched. While keeping her safe. Something dangerous flashed across his face. Her? Mara cursed internally. She hadn't meant to reveal that detail, hadn't meant to give him anything more than what he'd already figured out just by looking at her. Victor, please, just let me go. Pretend you never saw me. Pretend. He laughed, a harsh sound that held no humor. You want me to pretend I didn't just discover that my ex-wife has been hiding my daughter from me for half a year? That she let me believe she'd terminated a pregnancy that very clearly still exists? It was the only way to keep her safe. Safe from what, Mara? From me? His control cracked, letting anger bleed through. You think I would have hurt you? Hurt our child? No, not you. She looked around nervously, suddenly aware they were having this confrontation in the open, on a public street where anyone could see or hear. Victor, not here. Please. He studied her for a long moment, and she could see him processing information, cataloging details the way he always did. The fear in her eyes, the way she kept glancing over her shoulder, the protective curl of her body around her belly. Get in the car. His tone left no room for argument. I can't, Mara. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. I'm not asking. Whatever this is, whatever made you run, whatever threat you're protecting our daughter from, we're not discussing it in the rain where anyone can see. Get in the car. She wanted to refuse, wanted to tell him that getting into that sedan meant stepping back into the world she'd fought so hard to escape. But standing in the rain, soaked through and shivering, 7 months pregnant with his child, she also knew she didn't have much choice. Victor's hand found the small of her back, guiding her toward the sedan with the same possessive touch she remembered from their marriage. It should have made her angry, his assumption that he could still direct her movements, still make decisions for her. Instead, it just made her tired. The driver, a man she recognized as Thomas, one of Victor's most trusted people, opened the back door without a word. Mara slid inside, grateful for the warmth and the privacy the tinted windows provided. Victor followed, settling beside her with enough space between them to be respectful but close enough that she could smell his cologne, the same scent she used to bury her face in when he held her. Thomas pulled smoothly into traffic without needing instructions. Silence stretched between them. heavy with 6 months of deception and the truth that now sat unavoidably present in the confined space. Mara kept her hands folded over her belly, feeling their daughter move restlessly. She always became more active when Mara was stressed. "When's your due date?" Victor's voice was carefully neutral. "February 15th. You're 7 months? Almost 8. He absorbed this, doing the math that would tell him she'd been about 10 or 11 weeks pregnant when she'd left. When she'd stood in their foyer and told him she'd ended it. You planned this, the lie, the disappearance, all of it. It wasn't a question, but she answered anyway. Yes. Why? I told you, to keep her safe. From what? His control was slipping again, frustration bleeding into his tone. You keep saying that like it explains everything, but it explains nothing. Safe from what, Mara? What threat could possibly have been severe enough to make you fake a termination and vanish? Mara closed her eyes. This was the part she'd been dreading, the explanation she'd never wanted to give because it meant revealing just how close the danger had been. Someone in your organization, someone high enough to know about the pregnancy, about us. They called me 3 days before I left. She felt him go still beside her. Who? I don't know. The number was blocked. The voice was disguised. She opened her eyes, staring straight ahead rather than looking at him. But they knew things. Details about where I went, what doctor I was seeing, what we talked about that morning at breakfast. They knew everything, Victor. What did they say? That accidents happen to pregnant women. That men like you make enemies and families pay the price. That if I stayed, the baby wouldn't make it to term. She swallowed hard against the memory. They gave me a choice. Disappear, or watch our daughter die before she ever had a chance to live. Victor's hand clenched into a fist against his thigh. Why didn't you tell me? Because they told me not to. Because they said if I involved you, they'd know, and they'd act immediately. She finally turned to look at him. Because I couldn't risk it, Victor. I couldn't risk her. So you made me believe you'd killed our child instead. The words came out low, almost dangerous. I made you believe there was nothing left to protect, nothing worth following me for. Mara's voice cracked. It was the only way I could think of to get you to let me go completely, to make sure you wouldn't search for me, wouldn't try to bring me back. I needed you to think it was over. It worked. His voice was hollow. You want to know what the last 6 months have been like? Finding out I was going to be a father and losing it in the same conversation? Wondering what I did wrong, what I could have done differently to make you want to keep it. Victor, I drank myself into oblivion for 2 weeks straight. Thomas had to run the organization because I couldn't function. I kept thinking about what we'd lost, what you'd done, why you'd made that choice. He laughed bitterly. The whole time you were out here, pregnant, hiding from a threat I didn't even know existed. The car turned down a quieter street, heading toward a part of the city Mara didn't recognize. She shifted nervously. Where are we going? Somewhere safe, somewhere we can figure this out without worrying about who's watching. He pulled out his phone, typing something quickly. I have a property here. Secure, private. I'm not going back with you. She said it firmly, even though her resolve was weakening with every passing minute. Whatever you're thinking, whatever you're planning, I can't go back to that life. Our daughter deserves to have her father. Victor's tone was absolute. Our daughter deserves to be alive. That's all that matters. Then we agree on something. He looked at her directly, and she saw the determination there, the same ruthless focus he applied to everything he deemed important. Someone threatened my child. Someone in my own organization. That ends now. Mara's stomach dropped. Victor, no. You can't. If you start investigating, if you go after them, they'll know I told you. They'll what? They already know I found you, Mara. You think we weren't seen on that street? That there aren't a dozen people who've already reported back that Victor Hale was spotted in Seattle with his supposedly ex-wife, who's very obviously pregnant? He shook his head. The secret's out. The question now is what we do about it. She wanted to argue, to tell him he was wrong, that she could still slip away and disappear again. But deep down, she knew he was right. The moment he'd stepped out of that car, the moment their eyes had met across the street, her carefully constructed invisibility had shattered. I won't let you put her in danger. Mara's hand pressed protectively over her belly. Neither will I. Victor's expression softened slightly. We may not be married anymore, Mara. We may not even like each other after what you put me through. But that's my daughter you're carrying, and I protect what's mine. The possessiveness in his tone should have bothered her, should have reminded her of all the reasons their marriage had been complicated, all the ways his world had slowly suffocated her until she couldn't breathe. But right now, exhausted and scared and still soaked from the rain, part of her was relieved to have someone else carry the weight of protecting their child. Just for a moment. Just until she could think clearly again. The sedan pulled up to a modern building in a residential neighborhood, all glass and steel and security cameras. Thomas opened the door, offering Mara his hand as she struggled to exit gracefully with her belly throwing off her balance. Victor was beside her immediately, his hand at her elbow, steadying her. 6th floor, he told Thomas. Have the team do a sweep. I want to know who's been watching this building, who's been in the neighborhood, anything unusual in the last 48 hours. Yes, sir. They rode the elevator in silence. Mara studied her reflection in the mirrored walls, bedraggled, exhausted, her dark hair plastered to her skull from the rain. She looked like exactly what she was, a woman who'd been running for too long. Victor, by contrast, looked perfectly composed despite the rain. His suit was probably ruined, but he wore it like armor anyway, his posture rigid with the control she'd always both admired and resented. The apartment was exactly what she'd expected. Expensive, impersonal, probably used for business rather than living. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city. Minimalist furniture. Nothing that suggested anyone actually lived here. Bathrooms down the hall, Victor said, shrugging out of his wet jacket. There should be clothes in the bedroom closet. They'll be too big, but at least they're dry. Mara didn't argue. She disappeared into the bathroom, stripping out of her soaked coat and maternity dress, grateful for the shower that let her warm up and wash away the shock of the afternoon. She found an oversized sweater and a pair of sweatpants in the closet. Men's clothing, probably Victor's, but soft and comfortable. When she emerged, he'd made tea. 2 cups sat on the coffee table, steam rising from them. Victor stood by the window, phone pressed to his ear, having a conversation in the low, clipped tones he used for business. I don't care what it takes. Pull the records from that entire week. Phone logs, security footage, personnel files. Someone made that call and I want to know who. A pause. No, not tomorrow, tonight. And Marcus, keep it quiet. Whoever this is, they're close enough to have had access to my personal life. I don't want them knowing we're looking until we're ready to move. He ended the call, turning to find Mara standing in the middle of the room, drowning in his clothes. Something flickered in his expression, recognition, maybe, or memory. She'd worn his shirts before. In the early days of their relationship, when everything had still been simple, when she'd believed she could love a dangerous man without becoming collateral damage. Sit, he gestured to the couch. You need to eat. When's the last time you had a proper meal? I eat fine. That wasn't the question. Mara sighed, sinking onto the couch and accepting the tea he handed her. It was exactly how she liked it. Barely any sugar, a splash of milk. He'd remembered, even after 6 months. Victor sat in the chair across from her, maintaining that careful distance. Tell me everything. From the beginning. The phone call, the threat, everything they said. So she did. She walked him through the conversation that had changed everything, providing every detail she could remember. The voice that might have been male or female, too distorted to tell. The specifics they'd known about her pregnancy, her doctor's appointments, her daily routines. The cold calculation in their tone when they'd offered her the choice. Victor listened without interrupting, his expression growing darker with each detail. They knew about the Wednesday appointments, he said when she finished. The ones you told me were for prenatal vitamins. They were prenatal appointments. I lied about the vitamins part because I wasn't ready to tell you yet. Mara set down her tea. But yes, they knew the exact day, the exact time. They knew the doctor's name. That's a very short list of people. Victor pulled out his phone again, making notes. My security detail, my executive team, household staff who might have overheard conversations, maybe a dozen people total. It could have been someone following me, surveillance. For how long? They'd need weeks of observation to know your patterns that precisely. And my security would have spotted a tail. He shook his head. No, this was someone with direct access to information. Someone in my inner circle. The thought made Mara's skin crawl. She'd known most of those people, had trusted them, in the limited way you could trust anyone in Victor's world. What are you going to do? Find them. Eliminate the threat. He said it casually, like he was discussing a business merger rather than potentially killing someone. Victor, don't. He held up a hand. Don't ask me to show mercy to someone who threatened my child, who terrorized my wife, ex-wife, into faking a termination and going into hiding, who's been out there for 6 months knowing they got away with it. His eyes were hard. I've built my reputation on being reasonable, on solving problems with negotiation when possible. But this is personal. Mara should have been horrified, should have argued against the violence implicit in his words, but she was too tired and too scared and too aware that whoever had threatened her baby was still out there. I need guarantees, she heard herself say. If I stay, if I let you help, I need to know she'll be safe. Really safe, not just protected by your security and your reputation. What do you want? I want out. The words tumbled out before she could stop them. I want you out. I want our daughter to grow up in a world where people don't threaten pregnant women to make points, where her father's enemies can't use her as leverage. Victor's expression didn't change, but she saw something flicker in his eyes. You're asking me to walk away from everything I've built. I'm asking you to choose. Your empire or your daughter. Mara's voice was steady despite her racing heart. Because I won't raise her in that world, Victor. I can't. I've spent 6 months learning how to live outside of it, and I'm not going back. His silence stretched between them, taut with the weight of the ultimatum she'd just delivered. Mara knew she was gambling, knew that asking Victor Hale to abandon his organization was asking him to fundamentally change who he was. The man she'd married had defined himself by his power, his control, his position at the top of a hierarchy built on fear and respect. But the man she'd married had also wanted a child more than anything, had talked about legacy and family with a longing that suggested all his power meant nothing without someone to share it with. You have no idea what you're asking. His voice was low. Yes, I do. I'm asking you to prove that we matter more than your empire, that she matters more. Mara gestured to her belly. You want to be her father? You want to be part of her life? Then choose a life she can be part of. Victor stood, walking back to the window. Rain still streaked down the glass, turning the city lights into watercolor blurs. She watched the tension in his shoulders, the rigid control he maintained even when everything inside him must be churning. I'll need time, he said finally, to transition out, to make sure the organization doesn't collapse into chaos and violence when I step away. People depend on me. How much time? Months? Maybe a year? She'll be born in 6 weeks, Victor. I need her safe before that happens. He turned to face her. Then I find the traitor first. Eliminate that specific threat while I set up a longer-term exit strategy. Would that be acceptable? Mara considered. It wasn't everything she wanted, wasn't the clean break she'd been hoping for, but it was more than she'd expected him to offer. And if you can't find them in time, then I make sure you and our daughter are somewhere safe and surrounded by people I trust absolutely. People who aren't connected to my organization, who have no stake in power games and territory disputes. His jaw tightened. I won't let anything happen to either of you, Mara. Not again. The again hung in the air between them, an acknowledgement that he'd already failed once by not seeing the threat inside his own organization, by not protecting her when she'd needed it most. I want to believe you, she said softly. But 6 months ago, I trusted that your world was something I could navigate. That loving you didn't mean putting myself in danger. I was wrong. 6 months ago, I didn't know someone close to me was capable of threatening an innocent woman and her unborn child. Now I do. Victor's expression hardened. And I promise you, Mara, when I find out who made that call, they'll wish they'd never thought to use my family as a weapon. The casual mention of violence should have disturbed her more than it did. But Mara had lived in Victor's world long enough to understand that some threats required absolute responses. Whoever had terrorized her into hiding wouldn't stop with warnings and negotiations. Her daughter kicked hard against her ribs, as if protesting the entire situation. Mara rubbed the spot absently. Victor's gaze tracked the movement. Can I He stopped himself, looking almost uncertain. It was an expression she'd rarely seen on him. Can you what? Feel her move. The request was so simple, so human, that it cut through all the tension and complicated history between them. This was the moment Mara had stolen from him. The simple joy of feeling his daughter kick, of knowing she was real and growing and alive. 6 months of her pregnancy that he'd never get back, all because of a threat neither of them had seen coming. She nodded, unable to speak past the sudden lump in her throat. Victor crossed the room slowly, as if approaching something fragile he might break with the wrong movement. He knelt beside the couch, his hand hovering uncertainly over her belly. Here. Mara guided his palm to where their daughter was most active, pressing it firmly against the sweater. They waited in silence. Then it happened. A solid kick directly against Victor's hand, strong and unmistakable. His expression transformed. All the anger and control and calculated intimidation fell away, leaving something raw and almost vulnerable. She's strong. She never stops moving, especially at night. Mara found herself smiling despite everything. I think she's going to be a nightmare to get to sleep. Another kick. Victor's thumb stroked gently across Mara's belly, his touch reverent in a way she'd never seen from him before. What else? Tell me everything I've missed. So she did. She told him about the morning sickness that had lasted well into the second trimester, the food aversions that made no logical sense, the way their daughter responded to music by kicking along to the rhythm. She told him about the ultrasound she'd gone to alone, the pictures she'd kept in a shoebox because she couldn't bear to look at them too often. Victor absorbed every detail like a man dying of thirst finally finding water. His hand never left her belly, maintaining that connection to the daughter he'd thought he'd lost. I'm sorry. Mara hadn't planned to apologize, but the words came anyway. For lying, for making you believe she was gone, for all of it. I didn't know what else to do. You did what you thought you had to do to protect her. His voice was rough. I can't fault you for that, even if I hate how it happened. I never stopped. She caught herself, not sure she should finish the sentence. What? Loving you. I never stopped. Leaving wasn't about not wanting to be with you, Victor. It was about keeping her alive. His eyes met hers, and she saw the grief there, the loss that had nothing to do with death and everything to do with choices and consequences and threats that had torn them apart. We can't go back, he said quietly. Even if I wanted to, even if you wanted to, too much has happened, too many lies between us. I know. But we can go forward. His hand was still on her belly, still connected to their daughter. We can find whoever did this. We can make sure she's safe, and we can figure out what kind of parents we're going to be, even if we're not together. Mara nodded, not trusting her voice. Victor's phone buzzed. He pulled it out reluctantly, reading the screen with a frown. Marcus found something. Security footage from my building the week you left. Someone accessed the private elevator to our floor multiple times. Someone who shouldn't have been there. Who? He's sending me the images now. Victor opened the attachment, his expression darkening as he studied the screen. Then he went very still. What is it? He turned the phone so she could see. The image showed a man in a maintenance uniform entering an elevator, his face clearly visible to the security camera. Mara's blood ran cold. She recognized him, not from his current position as maintenance staff, but from the years before, when he'd been part of Victor's executive protection team, when he'd been trusted with the family's safety. Michael Reeves, Victor said softly, and the name sounded like a death sentence. He was fired 8 months ago for skimming money from one of our operations. I thought he'd just disappeared. He called me, Mara whispered. He was the one who made the threat. Victor's hand clenched around the phone hard enough that she heard the case crack. Are you certain? The voice was disguised, but she closed her eyes, letting the memory wash over her. He knew too much. Things only someone who'd been in our home would know. Details about conversations, about our routines. It had to be him. He's been watching you this whole time, waiting to see if you'd actually stay gone. Victor stood abruptly, already dialing. Thomas, I need a location on Michael Reeves, last known address, associates, anything he's touched in the last 6 months, and I need it 5 minutes ago." He paced while he listened to the response, his movements predatory. This was the Victor that had built an empire. Focused, ruthless, absolutely certain of his next move. "I'm coming with you," Mara said. "No." "Victor, no." He turned to face her, and his expression was absolute. "You're 7 months pregnant, and we're hunting a man who threatened to kill you and our daughter. You're staying here where you're safe, and that's not negotiable. You can't just watch me." He grabbed his jacket. "Thomas is outside. He'll stay with you until I get back. Don't open the door for anyone else. Don't leave this apartment. Don't even go near the windows. Understood?" Mara wanted to argue, wanted to insist on being part of ending the threat that had controlled her life for 6 months. But she could see the determination in Victor's eyes, the fear underneath his control that something might happen to her or the baby if she came along. "Promise me you'll be careful." "I'm always careful." He paused at the door. "I'm ending this tonight, Mara. One way or another, Michael Reeves won't be a threat to our family after today." Then he was gone, leaving her alone in the apartment with nothing but her thoughts and the weight of their daughter kicking restlessly against her ribs. Mara moved to the window despite Victor's warnings, watching the rain continue to fall over the city. Somewhere out there, Victor was hunting the man who'd destroyed their marriage, the man who'd forced her into 6 months of hiding and lies. Part of her hoped Victor found him. Part of her was terrified of what would happen when he did. She pressed her hand over her belly, feeling their daughter move. "Your father's a complicated man," she whispered, "but he loves you. Even if he's never met you, even if I kept you from him, he loves you enough to walk away from everything for you." The question now was whether walking away would be enough, whether eliminating one threat would make them safe, or if Victor's world would always find ways to reach them. Mara settled onto the couch to wait, knowing that whatever happened next would determine everything, not just for her and Victor, but for the daughter they both wanted desperately to protect. Outside, the rain continued to fall, washing the city clean while somewhere in its depths, old debts were being settled and new futures were being forged in violence and choice. The minutes stretched into hours. Mara sat on the couch, watching the city lights blur through rain-streaked windows, one hand pressed against her belly, while their daughter performed acrobatics against her ribs. Thomas stood by the door like a sentinel, silent and watchful, his presence both comforting and unnerving. She'd known him during her marriage, had trusted him as much as she'd trusted anyone in Victor's organization. But 6 months of paranoia had taught her that trust was a luxury she couldn't afford. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number made her heart skip before she realized it was Victor using a burner. "Found him. Ending this." 3 words that could mean anything. Mara's fingers hovered over the screen, wanting to respond, to demand details, to know what ending this actually meant. But she knew Victor well enough to understand he wouldn't answer. When he was in the middle of handling a threat, communication became a liability. She set the phone down and tried not to imagine what was happening across the city. Tried not to think about Michael Reeves and what he must have felt when Victor's people tracked him down. Tried not to remember the cold calculation in the voice that had threatened her baby 6 months ago. "He'll be fine, ma'am." Thomas spoke for the first time in an hour, his voice low and reassuring. "Mr. Hale knows what he's doing." "That's what I'm afraid of." Mara pulled the oversized sweater tighter around herself. "I spent 6 months running from his world, Thomas. Now I'm right back in the middle of it." "You never left it, not really." He shifted position slightly, still maintaining his watch on the door. "The threat was always there. You just made yourself invisible for a while. And now I'm visible again. Now you have protection again. There's a difference between hiding and being safe, Mrs. Hale. It's just Mara now. We're divorced." Thomas's expression suggested he didn't consider that detail particularly relevant. "Mr. Hale has been different since you left. Focused entirely on business. No personal life to speak of. Some of us wondered if he'd just shut that part of himself down completely." Mara shouldn't have cared. Their marriage had ended the moment she'd walked out that door with her suitcase and her lies. But hearing that Victor had suffered, that her disappearance had changed him, made something ache in her chest. "I did what I had to do." "I know. Doesn't make it hurt less for either of you." Thomas checked his phone. "But tonight he's not thinking about hurt. He's thinking about eliminating the man who made you feel like you had to choose between your husband and your child's safety. The apartment fell silent again except for the rain. Mara must have dozed off despite her anxiety because she jerked awake to the sound of the door opening. Thomas had his weapon drawn before she could fully process what was happening, then relaxed as Victor stepped inside. He looked like he'd been through a war. His suit jacket was gone, his shirt torn at the shoulder and stained with something dark that might have been blood. His knuckles were scraped raw, but his eyes were clear and focused as they found Mara on the couch. "It's done," he said simply. Mara struggled to her feet, her heart pounding. "Done how?" "Michael Reeves won't be threatening anyone ever again." Victor's voice was flat, emotionless. He confirmed everything. The call, the surveillance, a lot of it. He'd been watching you even after you disappeared, waiting to see if you'd stayed gone or if I'd found you. "Is he—" She couldn't finish the question. "Alive? Yes. Barely." Victor moved to the bar, pouring himself 2 fingers of whiskey and downing it in one swallow. "He's in a hospital under guard. When he's stable enough to move, he'll be transferred somewhere very far away where he can spend the rest of his life thinking about what happens when you threaten my family." Thomas nodded once and slipped out of the apartment, giving them privacy. Mara watched Victor pour a second drink, noting the slight tremor in his hands. He was coming down from adrenaline, from whatever violence he'd committed in her name. "What did you do to him?" "What needed to be done?" He set down the glass without drinking. "He told me everything, Mara, every detail. How he'd been planning this since I fired him, how he saw threatening you as the perfect revenge, how he'd been building evidence to blackmail me with, recordings of private conversations, security footage he'd copied before he left. Where is it? The evidence?" "Destroyed. All of it. Marcus has people scrubbing every system he had access to, every backup, every hidden cache. By morning, it'll be like Michael Reeves never existed in my organization." Victor's jaw tightened. He thought he was clever, thought he could hurt me by hurting you and get away with it. But he didn't account for you finding me. No, his plan fell apart the moment we ran into each other on that street. Victor finally looked at her directly, and she saw the exhaustion there beneath the control. "He's been watching you for months, following you to doctor's appointments, learning your routines. He knew where you lived, where you worked, everything." The thought made Mara's skin crawl. All those months she'd thought she was safe, hidden, protected by her new identity. She'd been under surveillance the entire time. Why didn't he just kill you? Because that wasn't the point. The point was making me suffer, making me believe I'd lost my child, watching me fall apart, knowing he was the one who'd orchestrated it. Victor's voice was cold. He wanted me to hurt, and he wanted to be able to hold it over me forever. The threat was always meant to be ongoing. Mara sank back onto the couch, processing this. So even if I'd stayed hidden, even if you'd never found me, he would have reached out eventually, would have told me the truth just to watch my reaction, would have used our daughter as leverage for the rest of our lives. Victor crossed the room, kneeling in front of her the way he had earlier. "You were never going to be free of him, Mara, not as long as he was out there." "And now?" "Now he's neutralized. The immediate threat is gone." His hand found her knee, a gentle touch that contrasted sharply with the violence he'd just committed. "But we need to talk about what comes next." Mara knew what he meant. The baby, their future, the impossible question of how 2 people with their history could possibly co-parent effectively. "I meant what I said earlier. I won't raise her in your world." "I know, and I meant what I said too. I'll find a way out." He stood, pacing to the window. "But it's not going to be simple or quick. I have responsibilities, people who depend on me. I can't just walk away overnight without creating a power vacuum that would put everyone at risk." "How long?" 6 months minimum to transition leadership. Maybe a year to fully extract myself from operations. He turned to face her. "I know that's not the answer you want. I know our daughter will be born long before that timeline completes, but I'm trying to be realistic about what's actually possible." Mara pressed both hands against her belly, feeling their daughter kick in response. 6 months to a year of continued exposure to Victor's world, of waiting for another threat to emerge, of wondering if every stranger on the street was someone with an agenda. "What do we do in the meantime?" "You come back with me, to my city, to a place I can actually protect you. Seattle's too exposed. Too many people know you're here now, too many variables I can't control. Victor's tone left little room for argument. I have a property outside the city, private, secure, completely separate from my business operations. You'd be safe there. That sounds like a prison. It's a home. A real one. Not a safe house or an apartment I use for meetings. I bought it 2 years ago, thinking maybe someday. He trailed off, looking uncomfortable with the vulnerability. I bought it thinking about family, about having a place that wasn't connected to everything else. You never mentioned it when we were married, because when we were married, I was still trying to convince myself I could have both, the empire and the family, the power and the peace. His expression hardened. Losing you taught me that was a fantasy. You can't serve two masters. Eventually you have to choose. Mara studied him, searching for signs of manipulation or control, but she only saw exhaustion and something that looked like genuine regret. If I agree to this, if I come back with you, I need guarantees. Name them. Complete transparency. No more secrets about threats or business or anything that could affect our daughter's safety. If someone so much as looks at me wrong, I want to know about it. Done. Full autonomy over medical decisions. I choose the doctor, the hospital, everything related to the pregnancy and birth. Reasonable. And if at any point I feel unsafe, if I decide this arrangement isn't working, I get to leave. No arguments, no trying to convince me to stay, no tracking me down when I disappear. She met his eyes. I need to know I'm choosing to be there, not being held there. Victor was quiet for a long moment. She could see him wrestling with it, with the idea of giving her that much freedom, when his every instinct was to control and protect. If you leave again, you take security with you. People I trust who aren't connected to my organization, who answer only to your safety. That's non-negotiable. Why? Because Michael Reeves won't be the last person who thinks they can get to me through you. Because our daughter makes you a target whether I'm in your life or not. And because... He stopped himself, jaw tightening. Because what? Because I can't go through losing you again. Losing both of you. The admission came out rough, almost angry. I know I don't have the right to ask you to stay. I know our marriage is over and we can't go back, but I'm asking you to let me protect you anyway, to let me be part of this, even if it's from a distance. Mara felt tears prick at her eyes. This was the Victor she'd fallen in love with, the one who showed vulnerability in rare, unguarded moments, the one who wanted family more than he wanted power, but didn't know how to have both. I'll come back with you. To the house, not to our old life. And we'll figure out the rest as we go. Relief washed over his features. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. I'm still angry with you for a lot of things. For the world you built. For the choices you made that put us in this position. Being back in your city doesn't erase any of that. I know. I'm angry too. At you for lying. At myself for not seeing the threat. At Michael for... He shook his head. We have a lot to work through. But right now, the priority is keeping you and our daughter safe until she's born. Everything else can wait. Their daughter kicked hard enough that Mara winced. Victor noticed immediately, moving closer. Is she okay? She's fine. Just very active tonight. I think she knows something's happening. Mara guided his hand back to her belly, needing him to feel the life they'd created together despite everything that had gone wrong. They stayed like that for a moment, connected through the daughter. Neither of them had met, but both of them would die to protect. The rain continued outside, washing the city clean, and Mara let herself imagine what it might be like to raise a child with this complicated, dangerous, unexpectedly tender man. We should get some rest, Victor said finally. I'll have Thomas arrange transportation for tomorrow. The house is about 3 hours from here by car. We can stop whenever you need to. I need my things. From my apartment. Give me the address. I'll have people pack everything and bring it to the house. Victor, you're not going back there. Not when Michael knew exactly where you lived, which means other people might know too. His expression was absolute. Your landlord will get notice that you're breaking the lease. Any personal items that matter, my people will handle it carefully. But you're not setting foot in that apartment again. Mara wanted to argue, to insist on some semblance of independence, but she was too exhausted, too overwhelmed by everything that had happened in the past 12 hours. There's a shoebox in the closet, ultrasound pictures. I need those. I'll make sure they're the first thing packed. Victor's voice softened. What else? Books? Clothes? Anything else that's important? There's not much. I lived pretty minimally these past 6 months. She thought about the sparse apartment she'd created, the life she'd built that had never quite felt real. Most of it can be replaced. Then we'll replace it. Whatever you need, whatever makes you comfortable. You'll have it at the house. He stood, offering her his hand. Come on, the bedroom's through here. You need actual sleep. She let him help her up, following him through the apartment to a bedroom that was slightly less impersonal than the living space. The bed was massive, covered in expensive linens that probably cost more than her monthly rent had been. Victor pulled back the covers, his movements careful. I'll be on the couch if you need anything. Thomas is right outside the door. You're not staying? The question came out before she could stop it. He paused, looking conflicted. I didn't think you'd want me to. Mara didn't know what she wanted. Her emotions were tangled, anger at being thrust back into Victor's world, relief at not having to face the threat alone, fear about what the future held, and underneath it all, a complicated longing for the man she'd loved before everything fell apart. I don't want to be alone right now, she heard herself say. You don't have to. We don't have to. I just don't want to be alone. Understanding crossed Victor's face. He kicked off his shoes and shrugged out of his ruined dress shirt, standing in just his undershirt and suit pants. I'll stay, but I'm keeping my distance unless you say otherwise. No assumptions, no expectations. Okay? They climbed into bed from opposite sides, maintaining careful space between them. Mara lay on her side, the only comfortable position at 7 months pregnant, while Victor stretched out on his back, staring at the ceiling. The rain had finally stopped, leaving the city quiet except for distant traffic sounds. I used to dream about you, Victor said into the darkness. After you left. Every night for weeks. I'd wake up reaching for you, and you wouldn't be there. Mara's throat tightened. I dreamed about you too, about telling you the truth, about you meeting our daughter, about what life might have been like if we'd felt safe enough to stay. We'll make it safe, whatever it takes, however long it takes. I'll make it safe for both of you. His hand found hers in the space between them, their fingers linking. I promise you that, Mara. I may not be able to promise we'll fix what broke between us, but I can promise I'll protect our family. Your word meant something once, before everything got complicated. It still does. I've never lied to you. Even when the truth was ugly, even when it would have been easier to hide things, I never lied. He squeezed her hand gently. You're the only one who can say that to me, the only person I couldn't deceive even when I wanted to. Is that supposed to make me feel better? It's supposed to make you understand that when I make you a promise, I keep it, no matter what. His thumb stroked across her knuckles. I failed you once by not seeing the danger close enough to hurt you. I won't fail you again. Mara wanted to believe him, wanted to trust that this time would be different, that Victor could actually change, that their daughter could grow up with a father who'd chosen her over his empire. But belief required hope, and she'd spent 6 months learning to survive without it. Just don't make promises you can't keep, she whispered. Then I'll only promise what I know I can deliver. Starting with this. Tomorrow, we go to the house. You'll be safe and comfortable. You'll have everything you need for the pregnancy and after, and I'll be there for every moment you'll let me be there for. Their daughter kicked against Mara's belly, as if registering her approval of this plan. Victor felt it too, his hand still linked with hers, and she heard his breath catch. Does it hurt when she kicks that hard? Sometimes. Mostly, it's just intense. Like she's reminding me she's real, she's here, she's waiting to meet us. Mara pulled their joined hands to rest on her belly. Talk to her. She can hear you. Victor shifted closer, propping himself up on one elbow so he could speak directly to her stomach. His free hand spread across the swell of their daughter, reverent and gentle. Hey, little one. It's me, your dad. I know I'm late to the conversation. Your mom had her reasons for keeping you secret, and they were good reasons even if I hated them. But I'm here now, and I'm not going anywhere. The baby kicked directly against his palm, a strong, deliberate movement. She knows your voice, Mara said softly. I played recordings sometimes, speeches you'd given, interviews. I told myself it was so she'd recognize you when you eventually met. But really, I just missed hearing you talk. Victor's expression in the dim light was unreadable. What did you tell her about me? The truth. That you were complicated and dangerous and powerful, but also capable of extraordinary gentleness when you let yourself be. That you wanted a family more than you wanted anything else, even if you didn't always know how to show it. That you'd move heaven and earth to protect the people you loved. She paused. That I loved you, even when I couldn't be with you. Loved. Past tense. I don't know what tense applies anymore, Victor. Everything's too complicated. Mara felt exhaustion pulling at her, the emotional weight of the day finally catching up. Ask me again when I'm not completely overwhelmed. He settled back beside her, their hands still linked over her belly. Sleep. We'll figure out the complicated parts tomorrow. She must have slept because she woke to early morning light filtering through unfamiliar windows and Victor's hand still holding hers across the space between them. He was already awake, watching her with an expression that made her chest ache. Morning, he said quietly. Hi. She struggled to sit up, her body protesting the movement. How long have you been awake? Couple hours. I didn't want to wake you. You need rest. He sat up, running a hand through his disheveled hair. Thomas has breakfast ready, and your things from the apartment arrived an hour ago. Mara processed this. You had people pack my entire life while I slept? I had people pack your belongings carefully and respectfully while you got the rest you desperately needed. Victor stood, offering her his hand. Come on, you should eat something. The baby needs fuel. She let him help her up, and they made their way to the kitchen where Thomas had indeed prepared breakfast, scrambled eggs, toast, fresh fruit, orange juice. The shoebox of ultrasound pictures sat on the counter, exactly where Victor had promised it would be. Mara picked it up, running her fingers over the worn cardboard. Thank you for making sure they got this. Open it. She lifted the lid, finding all her ultrasound pictures carefully organized by date. But underneath them was something new, a small velvet box she didn't recognize. What's this? Open it and see. Inside was a delicate platinum bracelet, the kind meant for a baby. Engraved on it was a name, Isla Rose Hale. Mara's breath caught. How did you? You told me last night. When you were half asleep, you mentioned wanting to name her Isla. The rose part seemed fitting. It was your grandmother's name. Victor watched her carefully. If you hate it, we can discuss other options. But I wanted you to know I was listening to everything you've shared. She traced the tiny bracelet with one finger, imagining it on their daughter's wrist. It's perfect. So we're naming her Isla? Unless you have objections. No objections. Isla Rose Hale it is. He paused. Or Isla Rose Lawson, if you'd prefer. I know we're not married anymore. I don't have any claim to... Hale, Mara interrupted. She should have your name. Whatever else happens between us, she's your daughter. She deserves to carry that connection. Something shifted in Victor's expression, relief mixed with something deeper. Thank you. They ate breakfast in comfortable silence, and Mara found herself relaxing incrementally. This felt almost normal, almost like the early days of their relationship before power and danger had complicated everything. Just two people sharing a meal, preparing for the arrival of their child. The car's ready whenever you are, Thomas announced from the doorway. Estimated 3 hours to the house, weather permitting. Mara nodded, suddenly nervous about this next step. Going back to Victor's city meant stepping fully back into his world, even if the house was separate from his business. It meant trusting that he could actually keep her safe, that Michael Reeves was truly the only threat they'd needed to worry about. Hey, Victor's hand found hers across the table. We don't have to do this if you're not ready. We can stay here another day, another week, whatever you need. No, the longer we wait, the harder it gets. She squeezed his hand. Let's go to the house. Let's start figuring out what our future actually looks like. An hour later, they were on the road. Mara sat in the back of the sedan, Victor beside her, watching Seattle disappear in the rearview mirror. She was leaving behind her carefully constructed safety, her false identity, everything she'd built to survive. But she was also moving towards something new, uncertain and complicated, but built on truth instead of lies. Their daughter kicked steadily against her ribs, as if encouraging this choice. Victor's hand rested on her belly, feeling each movement, and Mara let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, they could build something worth having from the wreckage of what they'd lost. The house materialized through morning fog like something from a dream. Mara had expected another sterile safe house, another temporary shelter that felt more like a cage than a home. Instead, Victor's sedan turned down a tree-lined private road that opened onto a sprawling property overlooking a lake. The house itself was modern but warm, all natural wood and stone and glass that seemed designed to bring the outside in rather than shut the world out. "This is it?" She couldn't keep the surprise from her voice. "This is home." Victor's tone was careful, as if he wasn't quite sure he had the right to call it that yet. "Or it will be, if you can stand it." Thomas pulled up to the front entrance, and Mara took in details she'd missed from the road. Gardens that looked professionally maintained but not overly formal. A wraparound porch with furniture that suggested actual use rather than decoration. Windows everywhere, flooding the interior with natural light. "It doesn't look like you," she said honestly. "It's not supposed to look like me. It's supposed to look like the life I wanted to build if I ever figured out how to step away from everything else." Victor opened the car door, offering his hand to help her out. "I bought it thinking about family, about what kind of place I'd want to raise a child." Mara accepted his help, struggling slightly as her center of gravity shifted. 7 months pregnant made every movement an exercise in recalibration. "When did you buy it?" 2 years ago, right after we got married." He steadied her as she found her footing. "You asked me once what I wanted our life to look like in 5 years, remember?" She did. They'd been lying in bed on a rare lazy Sunday, still tangled in sheets, talking about futures that felt impossibly distant. She'd asked what he wanted, and he'd given her some vague answer about stability and legacy that hadn't really answered the question at all. "You never mentioned this place?" "Because I wasn't ready to admit I wanted it. Wasn't ready to acknowledge that the empire I'd built might not be compatible with the family I wanted." Victor guided her toward the entrance, his hand at the small of her back. "Buying this was the first time I let myself imagine actually stepping away, actually choosing something else." The interior was even more impressive than the exterior. High ceilings and open spaces that somehow still felt intimate. Furniture that looked comfortable rather than expensive. A kitchen that was clearly designed for actual cooking rather than just for show. Everything about it screamed permanence, intention, care. "There's a nursery upstairs," Victor said, watching her take it all in. "I had it prepared last week. After I found you, after I knew there was still a baby to prepare for. If you hate it, we can change everything." Mara's throat tightened. He'd been planning this, preparing for their daughter even while hunting down the man who'd threatened her. "Can I see it?" "Of course." He led her up a curved staircase to the second floor, down a hallway lined with windows that overlooked the lake. The nursery was at the end of the hall, positioned to catch morning light. When Victor opened the door, Mara's breath caught. It was perfect. Soft grays and whites with touches of pale pink. A crib that looked handcrafted, built to last generations. A rocking chair positioned by the window. Shelves waiting to be filled with books and toys. Everything a baby could need, prepared by a father who'd thought he'd lost his chance at this. "Victor." She couldn't find words past the emotion clogging her throat. "Too much?" He looked uncertain, vulnerable in a way she rarely saw. "I can have it all changed. Different colors, different furniture, whatever you want." "It's beautiful." She moved into the room, running her hand along the edge of the crib. "When did you have time to do this?" "I made time. Once I knew Isla was real, was coming. Nothing else seemed as important as getting ready for her." He stayed in the doorway, giving her space to explore. "The rocking chair was my mother's. It's the only thing I kept from her estate. I thought maybe it could be something that connects Isla to family history, even the parts I don't talk about much." Mara knew Victor's relationship with his mother had been complicated. The woman had died when he was 16, leaving him alone in a world that had shaped him into someone hard and calculating. The fact that he'd kept her rocking chair, that he wanted their daughter to have it, said more than any speech could. "She would have loved being a grandmother," Mara said softly. "She would have loved you, would have told me I was an idiot for letting you go, for not seeing the threat close enough to hurt you." Victor's jaw tightened. "She always said the most dangerous enemies are the ones inside your own walls. I should have listened better." "You couldn't have known Michael would go that far." "I should have. I built my entire reputation on seeing threats before they materialized, on staying 3 steps ahead of everyone around me. But I was so focused on external dangers that I missed the one right under my nose." He finally stepped into the nursery, moving to stand beside her at the crib. It won't happen again. I'm restructuring everything: security protocols, personnel access, information chains. By the time Isla's born, this place will be impenetrable. Mara heard the determination in his voice, but also the fear underneath. Victor was used to controlling outcomes, to ensuring results through careful planning and ruthless execution. A baby would change all of that. Parenthood wasn't something you could manage like a business operation. She's going to get sick sometimes, Mara said gently. She's going to fall down and scrape her knees. She's going to do things we can't predict or control. You can't protect her from everything, Victor. Watch me try. His hand covered hers on the crib rail. I know it's impossible. I know I can't wrap her in bubble wrap and lock her in a tower. But I can eliminate the threats I do have control over. I can make sure that when she falls down, it's because she's learning to walk, not because someone pushed her. Their daughter kicked hard, as if protesting the entire conversation. Mara smiled despite herself. She's going to be a handful. I can already tell. Good. The world doesn't need more passive women who let themselves be pushed around. Victor's expression softened as he felt the movement under their hands. She'll be strong, like her mother. Strong and stubborn and probably too smart for her own good. Mara looked at him directly. Like both her parents. We're going to screw this up sometimes. You know that, right? The admission seemed to cost him. I don't know how to be a father. My own was absent more than present, and when he was around, he stopped himself. I don't have a good template for this. Neither do I. My parents loved me, but they weren't exactly equipped to prepare me for raising a child with someone like you. Mara squeezed his hand. We'll figure it out together. Make mistakes together. Learn together. Together suggests we're on the same team. Aren't we? At least when it comes to Isla? She turned to face him fully. I know we're not married anymore. I know we've hurt each other in ways that probably can't be completely fixed, but we both want what's best for our daughter. That has to count for something. Victor studied her face like he was memorizing details he'd thought he'd lost forever. It counts for everything. And if we can build on that foundation, if we can learn to trust each other again, even just in this one area, maybe it's enough. Maybe it is. Mara felt exhaustion pulling at her again. The emotional whiplash of the past 24 hours was catching up, combining with the physical strain of late pregnancy to leave her completely drained. I need to sit down. Of course. Come on. Victor guided her to the master bedroom across the hall, another space that managed to be both luxurious and livable. He helped her onto the bed, propping pillows behind her back. Rest. I need to make some calls anyway. Check in with Marcus about the business transition. You're really doing it? Stepping away? I told you I would. I keep my promises. He paused at the door. It won't be immediate. I need to find the right person to take over operations, ensure the transition doesn't create chaos. But I'm committed to it, Mara. By the time Isla's first birthday comes around, I'll be completely out. She wanted to believe him, wanted to trust that he could actually walk away from the empire he'd spent years building. And what will you do instead? You've defined yourself by that world for so long. I'll figure it out. Maybe I'll become one of those fathers who's obsessed with their kids' activities. Maybe I'll take up woodworking or something equally domestic. A hint of humor crossed his face. The point is, I'll be here, present, available, not disappearing for weeks at a time to handle territorial disputes or negotiate with people who communicate primarily through threats. I hope you mean that. I do. And I'll prove it, day by day, choice by choice. He closed the door partway, giving her privacy while staying close enough to hear if she needed anything. Mara lay back against the pillows, one hand on her belly, trying to process everything. 2 days ago, she'd been Charlotte Hayes, administrative assistant, living a quiet life of careful invisibility. Now she was back to being Mara Hale, or Mara Lawson, she still wasn't sure which, preparing to give birth to the daughter of a man who ran a criminal empire and promised he'd leave it all behind for her. It felt surreal, impossible. Like she'd wake up and find herself back in her sparse Seattle apartment, this whole encounter having been nothing but a complicated dream. But Igla kicked against her ribs, solid and real, and Mara knew this was happening. She was here. Victor had found her. The threat that had driven her into hiding was neutralized. Now came the harder part, figuring out how to build a life with a man she'd loved and left and still didn't quite know how to trust. She must have dozed off because she woke to late afternoon light and the smell of something cooking. Her back ached from the awkward position, and her bladder was screaming for attention, a constant state of being in the third trimester. She struggled to her feet, made her way to the attached bathroom, then followed the cooking smells downstairs. Victor stood in the kitchen, actually cooking, not directing staff or ordering takeout, but standing at the stove with a dish towel over his shoulder, stirring something in a pan. It was so domestic, so utterly unlike the man she'd married, that Mara stopped in the doorway just to stare. He noticed her watching. "What? You're cooking." "I know how to cook. I just rarely have time to do it." He gestured to the stove. "Pasta primavera. I remember you liked it. Light enough not to upset your stomach. Enough vegetables to satisfy the nutritional requirements you're probably tracking obsessively." She moved into the kitchen, peering at the pan. It looked good. More than good. "Where did you learn to cook?" "My mother taught me," said a man who couldn't feed himself was at the mercy of others. And mercy wasn't something to rely on in our world. Victor added fresh basil to the pan, the scent filling the kitchen. After she died, cooking was one of the few things that felt normal, controllable. I could follow a recipe and get predictable results when everything else was chaos. "You never cooked for me when we were married. I never let you see most of myself when we were married." He turned down the heat, facing her fully. "I kept you separate from too much of my life. Thought I was protecting you by not letting you too far in. Turns out I was just ensuring you'd never really know me." Mara leaned against the counter, watching him work. "I knew you. Maybe not every detail, but I knew the important parts. The man who wanted family more than power, even if he couldn't admit it. The one who was capable of extraordinary gentleness when he let his guard down. The one who was terrified of losing people he loved. And the one who let his world become so dangerous that you had to fake a pregnancy termination and go into hiding to protect our child." Victor's expression was bleak. "Don't romanticize it, Mara. I failed you in fundamental ways." "You did. And I failed you too by not trusting you enough to tell you about the threat. By choosing to handle it alone instead of believing we could face it together." She moved closer, drawn by something she couldn't quite name. "We both made mistakes. The question is whether we can do better now." "I want to." He set down the spoon, turning to face her completely. "I want to be the father Isla deserves. The partner you deserve, even if we're not together romantically. I want to be someone you can trust to keep you both safe. Then prove it. Not through grand gestures or promises about the future. Through small choices. Daily actions. Being present." Mara's hand found her belly, rubbing the spot where Isla was kicking. "Show me you mean it by actually doing it." "I will." Victor's hand covered hers, both of them connected to their daughter. "Starting tonight, starting with dinner and conversation and figuring out what we need to set up before Isla arrives." They ate on the porch despite the cold, wrapped in blankets while the sun set over the lake. Victor had been right about the pasta, light and flavorful without being heavy. They talked about practical things. Doctor's appointments that needed to be scheduled, baby supplies that still needed to be purchased, birth plans and backup plans and contingencies. "I want you there," Mara said at one point, surprising herself. "When she's born. I know we're not together, but I want you in the delivery room." Victor's fork stopped halfway to his mouth. "Are you sure?" "No, but I can't imagine going through it alone, and you're her father. You have a right to be there." She met his eyes. "Unless you'd rather not. Some men don't handle it well." "I'll be there." His voice was absolute. "Whatever you need, whatever makes you comfortable, I'll be there." They finished dinner as darkness settled over the lake, and Mara felt something shift between them. Not a return to what they'd had before. That was impossible. But maybe the beginning of something new. Something built on honesty and shared purpose, instead of passion and willful blindness to incompatibilities. "I should get you set up with a new doctor," Victor said, clearing their plates. "Someone close by, someone good. Do you have preferences?" "Just someone who'll listen, who won't dismiss my concerns or treat me like I'm overreacting." Mara had dealt with too many doctors who'd talked down to her during the pregnancy. "And someone who understands high-risk situations." "High risk?" Concern flashed across his face. "Is something wrong?" No, nothing medical. But given our circumstances, given the threats we've dealt with, I want a doctor who can handle security protocols without questioning why they're necessary. She stood, stretching her back. And I want the hospital locked down when it's time. No visitors except people we explicitly approve. Consider it done. I'll have Marcus compile a list of doctors we can trust, and I'll personally oversee hospital security arrangements. Victor moved to help her inside, his hand steadying her elbow. What else? What else do you need to feel safe? Mara considered. I want to meet your security team, the people who will be protecting us. I want to know their faces, their backgrounds, their loyalty structure. No more strangers making decisions about my safety. Tomorrow, I'll have everyone assigned to this property come in for introductions. He paused. And I want you to have a panic button, something you can activate if you ever feel unsafe for any reason. It'll bring security immediately, no questions asked. That seems excessive. Michael Reeves seemed like loyal employee until he threatened to kill you and our daughter. Victor's jaw was tight. Excessive is what keeps you alive in my world, or what used to be my world, before I decided our family mattered more. They made their way upstairs, falling into an easy rhythm that felt both foreign and familiar. Victor showed her where he'd had her things from Seattle stored, gave her space to settle into the master bedroom, didn't push for more proximity than she was comfortable with. I can take one of the guest rooms, he offered, if you'd rather have privacy. Mara thought about it, about sleeping alone in this big house, in this unfamiliar space, while 7 months pregnant and still processing everything that had happened. Stay, like last night. You keep your distance, I keep mine. But we're not alone. Relief crossed his features. Okay. They prepared for bed in careful choreography, moving around each other with the practiced ease of people who'd once shared space intimately. Mara changed into the maternity pajamas someone had thoughtfully packed from her apartment. Victor stripped down to sleep pants and an undershirt, the scars on his arms visible in the lamplight, reminders of a violent life she'd tried to forget. They climbed into bed from opposite sides, maintaining that careful distance. But this time, when Victor's hand found hers in the space between them, Mara didn't pull away. She linked their fingers and held on, needing the connection even if she couldn't quite articulate why. Thank you, Victor said into the darkness. For what? For giving me this chance. For letting me be part of it, even after everything. His thumb stroked across her knuckles. I know I don't deserve it. I know you had every right to stay hidden, to raise Isla without me. The fact that you're here means everything. You found me. I'm not sure I had much choice in the matter. You always have a choice. You could have run again, could have refused to come here, refused to let me in. He shifted slightly, turning to face her even though they couldn't see each other clearly in the dim room. But you didn't. You chose to stay, to try. That's not nothing. Mara's throat tightened. I'm still angry with you, for building a world so dangerous I had to disappear, for not seeing the threat close enough to hurt us, for making me choose between loving you and protecting our daughter. I know. I'm angry too, at myself, at Michael, at the circumstances that put us here. His hand tightened on hers. But anger doesn't mean we can't move forward. It just means we do it honestly, acknowledging what we've lost while trying to build something new. Something new. Mara tested the words. What does that even look like for us? I don't know yet. Co-parents who respect each other. Friends? Maybe, eventually. People who put Isla first even when it's hard. He paused. And if we're lucky, if we can rebuild enough trust, maybe something more. But I'm not assuming that. I'm not expecting it. Good. Because I'm not ready to promise anything beyond what we have right now. She felt Isla kick between them. This is enough. For today, this is enough. They lay in silence, hands linked, their daughter moving restlessly between them. Outside, the lake was quiet except for the occasional sound of wildlife. Inside, two broken people tried to figure out how to build something worth having from the pieces of what they'd lost. Tell me about the pregnancy, Victor said eventually. All the parts I missed. I want to know everything. So Mara talked. She told him about the morning sickness that had lasted 16 weeks, the food aversions that made no sense, the moment she'd first felt Isla move. She told him about the anatomy scan where she'd learned they were having a girl, about crying in the parking lot afterward because she'd had to experience it alone. She told him about the fears that kept her up at night, fears about childbirth, about being a good mother, about whether she was making the right choices. Victor listened without interrupting, absorbing every detail like he could somehow retroactively be present for the moments he'd missed. His hand never left hers, maintaining that connection even as Mara's words painted a picture of the lonely months she'd spent hiding from him. "I'm sorry you went through that alone," he said when she finished. "Sorry you felt like you had to. If I could go back and change it." "You can't. None of us can." Mara shifted position, trying to find a comfortable spot. "We can only move forward from here." "Then that's what we'll do. Together, for however long you'll let me be part of this." He moved closer, carefully spooning behind her in the way he'd learned helped support her belly during pregnancy. "Sleep. Tomorrow we start building the foundation for whatever comes next." Mara let herself relax against him, feeling the solid warmth of his body against her back, his hand splayed protectively over their daughter. It should have felt like a retreat to old patterns, to the marriage that had ended in lies and fear. Instead, it felt like something new, something honest and tentative, and maybe, just maybe, worth the risk of hoping for. She fell asleep to the sound of Victor's breathing and the movement of their daughter between them, and for the first time in 6 months, she didn't dream of running. Morning brought unexpected complications. Mara woke to cramping low in her abdomen, the kind that made her breath catch. She lay still for a moment, trying to determine if this was normal third trimester discomfort or something more concerning. Another cramp hit, stronger this time. She reached for Victor, finding him already awake beside her. "Something's wrong," she managed. He was up instantly, his training taking over. "What kind of wrong? Pain? Bleeding? Cramping? Sharp? I don't—" She gasped as another wave hit. "This isn't normal." Victor already had his phone out, dialing. "We're going to the hospital, now. Don't move, don't try to stand. I'm calling ahead so they're ready when we arrive." Fear flooded through Mara. It was too early. Isla wasn't due for another 6 weeks. She wasn't ready. They weren't ready. "Victor, look at me." He knelt beside the bed, his hand finding hers. "We're going to handle this. You and me and the best medical team I can find. Isla's going to be fine. You're going to be fine. But we need to go now." Thomas appeared in the doorway like he'd been summoned telepathically. Together, he and Victor got Mara downstairs and into the sedan, while Victor barked instructions into his phone about hospitals and specialists and clearing emergency rooms. The drive felt eternal. Mara focused on breathing through the cramps, on not panicking, on willing their daughter to hold on just a little longer. Victor's hand never left hers, his voice steady as he coordinated their arrival, but she could feel the fear radiating from him in waves. They pulled up to the emergency entrance of a private hospital, medical staff already waiting with a wheelchair. Victor refused to let anyone else touch her, lifting Mara himself and settling her carefully into the chair before following as they rushed inside. 7 months pregnant, he was saying to someone in scrubs, experiencing sharp cramping and possible early labor. She needs the best obstetrician you have, and she needs them now. Everything became a blur of questions and examinations and monitoring equipment. Mara answered what she could, let them hook her up to machines that tracked Isla's heartbeat and her contractions, tried not to think about all the things that could go wrong. "Braxton Hicks," the doctor said finally, her voice calm and reassuring. "False labor. Common in the 3rd trimester, especially with stress. Your baby's heartbeat is strong and steady. Everything looks normal." The relief was so intense Mara nearly sobbed. "She's okay?" "She's perfect. But you need rest, real rest, without stress or anxiety. These false contractions can continue if you don't take it easy." The doctor looked at Victor, who hadn't left Mara's side. "I assume you can arrange for her to have complete bed rest for the next few days?" "Whatever she needs." Victor's voice was rough with residual fear. "Whatever keeps them both safe." They kept Mara for observation for a few hours, monitoring both her and Isla to ensure the contractions didn't progress into actual labor. Victor sat beside the hospital bed, his hand linked with hers, looking like he'd aged years in the span of a morning. "I thought we were losing her," he said quietly. "When you said something was wrong, I thought—" "I know. I thought the same thing." Mara squeezed his hand. "But she's okay." We're okay. This time. What about next time? What if it's real labor and she comes too early? The fear in his voice was raw, unguarded. What if I can't protect her from biology and timing and all the things I can't control? Then we deal with it together, like we dealt with this. Mara shifted to look at him directly. You can't control everything, Victor, but you can be present. You can be there when things go wrong and help me handle them. That's what matters. He nodded, but she could see the struggle in his expression. A man who'd built his entire life on controlling outcomes, now facing the reality that parenthood meant surrendering to forces beyond his influence. I'm not good at powerlessness, he admitted. None of us are. But sometimes it's all we have. She guided his hand back to her belly, where Isla was kicking steadily, reassuring them both of her presence. Feel that? She's telling us she's fine, that we survived this scare, and we'll survive whatever comes next. She's stubborn, like her mother. And protective. Like her father, Mara managed to smile. She's going to be a force of nature, this one. The doctor cleared them to go home with strict instructions about rest and stress reduction. Victor took it as a personal mission, ensuring Mara didn't so much as lift a finger for the next 3 days. He brought her meals in bed, read to her from books she'd mentioned liking, sat with her while she rested, and refused to let her feel guilty about the imposed inactivity. This is what I'm here for, he said when she protested. Let me take care of you. Let me prove I can be what you both need. So she did. She let him care for her, let him show through actions that his promises weren't empty. And slowly, carefully, she felt the foundation of trust beginning to rebuild between them. Not the blind trust of their early relationship, but something more solid, something earned through crisis and choice and the daily decision to show up for each other. The days settled into a rhythm that felt almost ordinary. Victor worked from home, conducting business calls from his office while checking on Mara every hour like clockwork. She spent her enforced bed rest reading, watching the lake through the windows, and feeling Isla grow stronger with each passing day. The fear from the hospital scare lingered, but it became manageable, a reminder to be careful rather than a constant source of panic. On the 4th day, Mara woke to find Victor already dressed, looking uncertain in the doorway of their bedroom. I have to go into the city, he said without preamble. Meeting with Marcus and the transition team. I'll be gone most of the day. Mara pushed herself up against the pillows. The transition? You're really doing it? I told you I would. He moved into the room, sitting on the edge of the bed. We're identifying who can take over operations, what assets need to be liquidated, which relationships need to be formally severed. It's complicated, but it's happening. How complicated? Very. I built this empire over 15 years. Dismantling it without creating chaos takes precision. Victor's expression was serious. Some people aren't going to like it. Some are going to see it as weakness, an opportunity to move against me while I'm transitioning out. Fear spiked through Mara. Is that dangerous? For you? For me? I can handle myself, for you and Isla. He covered her hand with his. That's why I'm being careful, why I'm taking months instead of just walking away tomorrow. I need to ensure my exit doesn't paint a target on our family. I don't want you to get hurt because of this choice. I won't. I've survived worse than business negotiations and territorial disputes. He squeezed her hand gently. But I need you to promise me something. While I'm gone, you stay in the house. You don't go outside. You don't open the door for anyone except Thomas or the security team I introduced you to. Understood? Victor, please, Mara, just for today, just while I'm handling this transition meeting and can't be here to ensure your safety myself. The vulnerability in his voice was impossible to ignore. I need to know you're safe so I can focus on getting us out of this life. She wanted to argue about being treated like a prisoner, about the restrictions that felt like they were slowly closing in again. But she could see the genuine fear in his eyes, the way his hand trembled slightly as it held hers. This wasn't about control. It was about a man terrified of losing the family he'd just gotten back. Okay, I'll stay inside. I'll be careful. Relief washed over his features. Thank you. Thomas will be right outside your door. Elena from the security team will be in the house. If you need anything at all, you tell them. I'll be fine. Go do what you need to do. She managed to smile. Isla and I will hold down the fort. Victor leaned in, pressing a kiss to her forehead, a gesture so gentle and unexpected it made her breath catch. Then he was gone, moving with the purposeful stride of a man walking into potential danger. The house felt larger with him gone. Mara tried to settle back into her routine of rest and reading, but restlessness gnawed at her. She was tired of being confined to bed, tired of being protected and managed and kept safe through restrictions. 8 months pregnant, and she felt like she'd traded one form of hiding for another. "Mrs. Hale?" Elena appeared in the doorway, professional and alert. "Can I get you anything? Breakfast? Tea?" "Just Mara, please, and I'm fine." She paused. "Actually, could I sit on the porch just for a little while? I'm going stir-crazy in this room." Elena hesitated. "Mr. Hale was clear about you staying inside." "The porch is technically inside the security perimeter. I'm not asking to go for a walk or leave the property. I just want to sit somewhere with fresh air and a view of something other than these walls." Mara kept her tone reasonable. "Please, I promise I'll stay within sight of the house." After a moment, Elena nodded. "The porch is acceptable. Let me help you down the stairs." The fresh air felt like freedom after days of confinement. Mara settled into one of the comfortable chairs, wrapped in a blanket against the cold, and watched the lake ripple in the morning breeze. Elena took up position near the door, close enough to intervene if needed, but far enough to give Mara some sense of privacy. "How long have you worked for Victor?" Mara asked after a while. 3 years. Started as a junior security analyst, worked my way up to personal protection detail." Elena's stance remained alert, but her tone was conversational. "He's a good employer, demanding, but fair." "And the transition? How did the security team feel about him stepping away?" Elena considered her answer carefully. "Some people are nervous about the change. Mr. Hale has been a stabilizing force in his sector for a long time. His exit creates uncertainty, but most of us understand why he's doing it. Family should come first." "Does everyone know? About me? About the baby?" "The core security team knows. We're the ones responsible for keeping you safe, so we needed full context." Elena's expression softened slightly. "For what it's worth, I think he's making the right choice. Power isn't worth much if you have no one to share it with." Mara absorbed this, thinking about Victor's empire and everything he was giving up. The power, the respect, the identity he'd built for himself over 15 years. All of it being dismantled so their daughter could grow up in a world where her father's enemies couldn't use her as leverage. "Do you think he can actually do it? Walk away completely?" "Honestly, I don't know. Men like Mr. Hale aren't built for retirement. They're built for action, for control, for making decisions that impact hundreds of people." Elena shifted position slightly. "But I've never seen him like this, focused on something that isn't business, that has to mean something." An engine sound cut through the quiet, a car coming up the long driveway. Elena immediately went on alert, her hand moving to her weapon. "Stay behind me," she ordered Mara. "It's probably just a delivery or—" "Mr. Hale isn't expecting anyone, which means whoever this is, they're not supposed to be here." Elena was already on her radio. "Thomas, we have an unidentified vehicle approaching the house. I need backup now." Mara's heart hammered as a sleek black car pulled up to the house. Not Victor's sedan, not any vehicle she recognized. The driver's door opened and a woman emerged, tall, elegant, probably in her 50s, wearing an expensive coat and an expression of absolute determination. "I'm here to see Mara Lawson," the woman called out. "Or should I say Mara Hale? I understand she's been living here." Elena stepped forward, blocking the porch steps. "This is private property. You need to leave now." "I'll leave when I've spoken to the woman my nephew has been hiding." The woman's voice carried authority, the kind that came from years of commanding respect. "Tell her Catherine Hale is here. I think she'll want to hear what I have to say." Catherine Hale. Victor's aunt. The only family he had left. A woman he'd mentioned maybe twice in all the time they'd been married. Mara had never met her, had understood from Victor's careful non-answers that their relationship was complicated at best. "Let her through," Mara heard herself say. "Mrs. Hale." Mr. Hale was explicit about, "She's family, or close enough." Mara stood carefully, using the chair arm for support. "Let her through, Elena." Elena looked unhappy, but stepped aside as Catherine Hale climbed the porch steps with the confidence of someone who'd never been denied access to anything in her life. Up close, the family resemblance was unmistakable. She had Victor's eyes, the same sharp intelligence and measuring gaze. So you're the woman who broke my nephew's heart and then reappeared carrying his child. Catherine's assessment was clinical. You're younger than I expected. Prettier, too. I can see why Victor lost his head over you. What do you want? Mara kept her voice steady despite her racing heart. To talk. To understand what's happening with my nephew and why he's suddenly dismantling everything he's built. Catherine gestured to the empty chair. May I? I drove 3 hours to have this conversation. The least you can do is sit with me for a few minutes. Mara nodded slowly, settling back into her chair while Catherine took the one opposite. Elena remained close, her hand still near her weapon, clearly unhappy with this entire situation. Victor doesn't know you're here, Mara said. It wasn't a question. Victor doesn't share his plans with me anymore, not since I opposed his marriage to you in the first place. Catherine's smile was thin. I told him then that mixing business with family was a mistake, that bringing someone into our world who didn't understand it would end badly. Looks like I was right. I left to protect our daughter. Someone in Victor's organization threatened to kill her if I stayed. Mara lifted her chin. So yes, maybe you were right that your world was too dangerous for family, but that's not my failure. That's his. That's yours. Something flickered in Catherine's eyes. Surprise, maybe, or respect. You have more spine than I gave you credit for. Victor always did prefer strong women, even when they made his life complicated. Why are you here, Catherine? What do you want from me? I want you to stop him. Catherine leaned forward, her intensity palpable. He's planning to walk away from everything. From the organization, from the power structure, from 15 years of careful building. Do you understand what that means? The chaos it will create? The power vacuum that every ambitious lieutenant and rival organization will rush to fill? That's not my problem. That's his choice. It's your influence. He's doing this because of you, because of that baby you're carrying. Catherine's gaze dropped to Mara's belly. He thinks he can just step away and play house, pretend he's a normal man with a normal family. But men like Victor don't get normal lives. They get power or they get destroyed. There's no middle ground. Then maybe it's time for the whole system to change. Mara's hand moved protectively over her stomach. Maybe the fact that your world doesn't allow for family and safety is exactly why it needs to be dismantled. Naive, dangerously naive. Catherine shook her head. The world Victor operates in doesn't care about your idealism. It will see his exit as weakness. It will come after everything he's built, everyone he's protected. People will die because he chose to walk away. People have died because he chose to stay, because men like him build empires on violence and control and then wonder why their families aren't safe. Mara met Catherine's eyes directly. I won't apologize for wanting my daughter to grow up in a world where her father comes home every night, where she doesn't have to wonder if today's the day someone uses her as leverage against him. Then you're asking him to stop being who he is, to fundamentally change everything that makes him Victor Hale. Catherine's voice was almost pitying. That's not love, girl. That's erasure. The words hit harder than Mara wanted to admit. Was that what she was doing? Asking Victor to destroy himself in order to be with her? Demanding he give up everything that defined him in exchange for family? He's choosing this, she said, but her voice was less certain. I gave him the option. I told him what I needed. He's the one who decided it was worth it. Because he's desperate. Because he lost you once and can't bear to lose you again. Because that baby represents everything he thought he could never have. Catherine stood looking down at Mara with an expression that might have been sympathy. But desperation makes poor foundation for life-changing decisions. Eventually, he'll resent you for making him choose. Eventually, he'll hate himself for what he gave up, and your family will fall apart anyway. Only this time, he'll have nothing to fall back on. You don't know that. You don't know what he's capable of becoming. I know what men like us are built for. Control, power, decisive action. Take that away, and we're nothing. Hollow. Catherine moved toward the stairs. I came here to ask you to reconsider, to give him a different option than complete capitulation or losing his family. But I can see you've already made up your mind. What other option is there? How do I keep our daughter safe while he stays in a world that actively threatens her? You learn to be part of that world instead of running from it. You become strong enough to stand beside him instead of asking him to kneel beside you. Catherine paused at the top of the steps. But that would require courage you clearly don't have. So instead, you'll take everything from him and call it love. The words were designed to wound, and they succeeded. Mara felt tears prick at her eyes as Catherine descended the stairs and returned to her car. Elena immediately moved to Mara's side. "Are you all right? Do you need anything?" "I need Victor to call me. Now." Mara's voice shook. "I need to talk to him before his aunt poisons whatever he's planning." Elena was already on her phone, making it happen. Within minutes, Victor's voice came through, tense and concerned. "Mara, what's wrong? Elena said there was an incident." "Your aunt was here. Catherine. She came to tell me I was destroying you by asking you to leave your organization." The words tumbled out. "Victor, is she right? Am I asking you to stop being yourself? Am I taking everything that makes you who you are?" Silence on the other end. Too long, too heavy with implications. "Victor?" Catherine had no right to come there, no right to say those things to you. His voice was hard, controlled. "Where is she now?" "Gone." "But that doesn't answer my question." Mara pressed her free hand against her chest, trying to slow her racing heart. "Are you going to resent me for this? For making you choose between your empire and our family? You didn't make me choose. Life did. Circumstances did. Michael Reeves threatening to kill our daughter did." She heard him take a breath. "I'm coming home. We need to have this conversation face to face. You said you'd be gone all day. The transition meeting can wait. You're more important. Isla's more important." Another pause. "I'll be there in an hour. Stay inside. Stay with Elena. And Mara, don't let Catherine's poison take root. She doesn't understand what I'm choosing because she's never wanted anything more than power." He ended the call, leaving Mara alone with her thoughts and her doubts. Elena helped her back inside, settled her on the living room couch with tea and blankets. But nothing could warm the cold fear that had taken root in her chest. What if Catherine was right? What if asking Victor to walk away was asking him to destroy himself? What if years from now, he looked at Mara and Isla and saw only what he'd sacrificed rather than what he'd gained? She pressed her hand against her belly, feeling Isla kick steadily. Their daughter deserved a father who was present, who was safe, who could be there without constantly looking over his shoulder for threats. But did that father deserve to lose everything that made him who he was? The question haunted her through the next hour, until she heard Victor's car on the driveway. He came through the door like a storm, moving straight to where she sat on the couch. "Tell me exactly what Catherine said." So Mara did. She repeated the conversation word for word, watching Victor's expression darken with each detail. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment, standing by the window with his back to her. "She's not entirely wrong," he said finally. Mara's heart sank. "Victor, not about you destroying me. About the transition creating chaos and danger for people under my protection." He turned to face her. "I've been so focused on getting out, on building a safe life for our family, that I haven't fully considered the collateral damage. People depend on the stability I provide, families I'm responsible for. Walking away affects more than just us. So what are you saying, that you can't leave after all?" "I'm saying it's more complicated than I wanted it to be." He moved to sit beside her, taking her hand. "But that doesn't change my commitment to you and Isla. It just means I need to be smarter about how I exit. More careful about who takes over, what safeguards I put in place, how I ensure the transition doesn't create the very danger I'm trying to escape." "How long will that take?" "Longer than 6 months. Maybe a year. Maybe more." He met her eyes. "I know that's not what you want to hear. I know you need safety now, not promises about eventual safety. But I'm trying to do this right. For everyone." Mara felt tears spill over, frustration and fear combining into something overwhelming. "I can't spend years waiting for you to finish transitioning out. I can't raise Isla in limbo, never knowing when the next threat will emerge, when the next Michael Reeves will decide to use us as weapons against you." "I know, which is why I'm proposing something different." Victor's grip tightened on her hand. "I step back from day-to-day operations immediately. Marcus takes over the tactical decisions, the territorial management, all of it. I become a figurehead, still technically in charge, but removed from the actual violence and danger. That gives me time to be present for you and Isla while still maintaining enough control to ensure a stable transition." "A figurehead? Would that actually work?" "In the short term, yes. It buys us time." Lets me be the father I want to be while ensuring my organization doesn't collapse into chaos. He brushed tears from her cheeks with his thumb. It's not perfect. It's not the clean break you wanted, but it keeps us together while I figure out how to actually get out without destroying everything in the process. Mara wanted to argue, to insist on the immediate exit she had demanded, but she could see the logic in his proposal, could understand that walking away completely might create more danger than it eliminated. What about when Isla's born? What if something happens and you're called away? Then I don't go. My family comes first, always. If Marcus can't handle something without me, then we need a better second in command. Victor's voice was absolute. I mean it, Mara. When you go into labor, when Ethla arrives, when you need me, nothing else matters. The organization can burn for all I care. You don't mean that. Try me. He cupped her face in both hands. I've spent 15 years building power, building control, building something I thought mattered. And in 6 months without you, I learned that all of it means nothing if I don't have family to share it with. So yes, I'll take time to transition properly, but I won't sacrifice you and Isla in the process. That's the line I won't cross. She wanted to believe him, wanted to trust that he could actually balance both worlds long enough to extract himself safely. But doubt still gnawed at her, Catherine's words echoing in her mind. What if Euron is right? What if years from now you resent me for making you choose? For taking away everything that defined you? Then I'll be a bitter old man who gets to watch his daughter grow up, who gets to be there for her first steps and her first words, and every moment that matters. Victor's smile was sad. I'd rather resent what I lost than lose what I have. I'd rather be present and angry than powerful and alone. That's not sustainable. That's not healthy. Maybe not, but it's honest. He pressed his forehead to hers. I don't have perfect answers, Mara. I don't know how this all works out in the end, but I know I want to try. I know I want to be in this house when Isla takes her first breath. I know I want to be the one teaching her to ride a bike and helping her with homework and walking her down the aisle someday. Everything else is negotiable. Mara closed her eyes, letting his words wash over her. This was the man she'd fallen in love with, the one who could be ruthless and tender in the same breath, who made promises he'd move heaven and earth to keep. I'm scared of this not working, of you getting hurt, of Isla growing up in a world where her father's choices put her in danger. Me too. I'm terrified. The admission was raw. But we face it together. We figure it out together. And if we make mistakes, we fix them together. That's what family does. Isla kicked hard between them, as if offering her own opinion on the conversation. They both felt it, both smiled despite the heavy topic. She's going to be trouble, Mara said. Good. The world needs more women who refuse to be quiet and manageable. Victor's hand splayed across her belly. We'll teach her to be strong, to stand up for herself, to never let anyone make her feel small or powerless. Even when her father's the most powerful man in the room? Especially then. I want her to know she doesn't need power to have value. That being loved and being safe and being herself matters more than any empire. He kissed Mara's forehead gently. I want her to have everything I never did, starting with parents who put her first. They sat like that for a long time, holding each other while their daughter moved between them. Outside, the lake reflected afternoon sun, serene and constant. Inside, two people tried to build a future from the fractured pieces of their past. I need you to promise me something, Mara said eventually. Anything. If this doesn't work, if the transition takes too long, or the danger escalates, or you realize you can't actually walk away, you tell me. You don't pretend everything's fine while it's falling apart. You give me the truth so I can make informed choices about our safety. I promise, complete transparency. No more secrets, no more protecting you by keeping you in the dark. Victor pulled back to look at her directly. And I need you to promise me something too. What? That if you decide to leave again, you take my security with you. That you don't disappear completely. That you let me be part of Isla's life, even if I can't be part of yours. His voice cracked slightly. I can survive losing you, Mara. I did it once, but I can't survive losing her. Not when I finally have the chance to be her father. The vulnerability in his admission broke something open in Mara's chest. I won't take her from you. Whatever happens between us, she deserves to know her father. to have both of us in her life. Thank you. He pulled her close, and she let herself sink into his embrace. Let herself believe, for just this moment, that maybe they could make this work, that maybe love and honesty and shared purpose could be enough to bridge the impossible gap between their worlds. The next few weeks passed in careful routine. Victor kept his promise about stepping back from operations, spending most of his time at the house, while Marcus handled day-to-day business. He attended every doctor's appointment with Mara, asked questions that showed he'd been researching pregnancy and childbirth, and transformed the nursery into something even more perfect than it had been. Mara watched him change, day by day, watched him become less of the ruthless operator she'd married and more of the father their daughter would need. It wasn't a complete transformation. He was still Victor Hale, still capable of cold calculation when the situation demanded it. But he was also softer around the edges, more willing to show vulnerability, more present in the quiet moments. I talked to Catherine, he told her one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sunset. Told her if she ever showed up here again without invitation, she'd regret it. What did she say? That I was making a mistake, that I'd regret choosing family over power, that she didn't raise me to be weak. Victor's smile was bitter. She didn't raise me at all. She sent money and ignored my existence unless I was useful to her political maneuvering. Her opinion on my life choices means less than nothing. She's still family. You and Isla are my family. Catherine is just DNA and shared history. He took Mara's hand. She doesn't get to poison this, doesn't get to make you doubt what we're building. I'm not doubting. Not anymore. Mara squeezed his hand. I'm trusting, cautiously, carefully, but trusting. That's all I can ask for. He pressed a kiss to her knuckles. Trust me to keep trying, to keep choosing you both, to keep becoming someone worthy of being Isla's father. 3 weeks before her due date, Mara woke in the middle of the night to wetness and the unmistakable sensation of her water breaking. She shook Victor awake, her voice surprisingly calm despite her racing heart. It's time. We need to go to the hospital. He was up instantly, moving with the controlled efficiency of someone who'd been preparing for this moment. Contractions? How far apart? Just started. Maybe 10 minutes. She breathed through one, gripping his hand. Victor, it's too early. She's not supposed to come for another 3 weeks. She's coming when she's ready. We've got this. His voice was steady, reassuring, even though she could see the fear in his eyes. Let's get you to the hospital. Everything's going to be fine. And somehow, with his hand in hers and his calm presence beside her, Mara let herself believe it. The drive to the hospital felt both endless and too quick. Mara breathed through contractions that were coming faster now, every 7 minutes, then 6. Victor kept one hand on the wheel and the other linked with hers, his jaw tight with controlled tension while he navigated the pre-dawn streets. You're doing great, he said during a particularly intense contraction. Just breathe, in through your nose, out through your mouth. That's it. When did you become an expert on labor breathing? Mara managed once the wave passed. I've been reading, watching videos, talking to the doctors about what to expect. His thumb stroked across her knuckles. I wasn't going to walk into this unprepared. Despite the pain and fear, Mara felt warmth spread through her chest. This was the Victor she'd needed all along, present, attentive, willing to learn rather than assume he already knew everything. They pulled up to the hospital's private entrance, the one Victor had arranged for maximum security and minimum exposure. Medical staff were already waiting, alerted by Thomas, who'd called ahead from the car. A wheelchair appeared, and Victor helped Mara into it with careful hands, refusing to let anyone else touch her. I've got her, he told the nurse who reached to assist. Just tell me where to go. They moved through sterile hallways to a private suite that looked more like a hotel room than a hospital. Floor-to-ceiling windows, comfortable furniture, space for Victor to stay without being in the way. He helped Mara onto the bed, staying close while nurses hooked her up to monitors that tracked her contractions and Isla's heartbeat. Everything looks good, the nurse said, checking the readouts. Baby's heart rate is strong. Contractions are progressing normally. Doctor, Chen will be here in about 20 minutes to examine you. The nurse left, and suddenly it was just the two of them in the quiet room, the monitors beeping steadily in the background. Mara felt another contraction building and gripped Victor's hand hard enough to hurt. "Breathe with me," he coached, his face close to hers. "In for 4, hold for 2, out for 6. You've got this." She followed his rhythm, breathing through the pain until it ebbed again. "How long did your research say this would take?" "Anywhere from a few hours to a full day for first babies. But every labor is different." He brushed damp hair back from her forehead. "However long it takes, I'm here. I'm not going anywhere." "What if something goes wrong? What if she's too early and there are complications?" "Then we handle them, together. The neonatal team is on standby, the best specialists in the state. We have every resource available." Victor's voice was absolute. Isla's going to be fine. You're going to be fine. I won't accept any other outcome." Despite everything, Mara almost smiled. That was so perfectly Victor, attempting to control biology through sheer force of will. "I don't think labor cares about what you will or won't accept." "Then labor hasn't met me yet." He kissed her forehead gently. "But seriously, Mara, we've survived everything else. Threats, separation, 6 months of lies and fear. We can survive this too." Dr. Chen arrived, professional and efficient, conducting an examination that confirmed what they already knew. Mara was in active labor, progressing normally, no signs of distress in either mother or baby, 3 centimeters dilated with a long way to go. "I'd estimate another 8 to 12 hours, the doctor said. "First babies tend to take their time. We'll monitor you closely, but everything looks textbook so far." The hours that followed blurred together, contractions that came closer and harder, pain that built in waves until Mara thought she couldn't take anymore. Victor stayed beside her through all of it, coaching her breathing, letting her grip his hand until his knuckles went white, offering ice chips and encouragement in equal measure. "I can't do this," she gasped during a particularly brutal contraction around hour 7. "It's too much, I can't." "Yes, you can. You're the strongest person I know." Victor's voice was steady, grounding. "You survived 6 months alone and pregnant, hiding from threats I couldn't see. You can survive this." "That was different. This is harder. But you're not alone anymore. I'm right here, and I'm not leaving." He pressed his lips to her temple. "Keep fighting, Mara. Keep breathing. Our daughter is almost here." Around hour 10, Dr. Chen came back to check her progress. 8 centimeters now, the finish line in sight. But the baby's position had shifted slightly, and concern flickered across the doctor's face. "What?" Victor caught it immediately. "What's wrong?" "Baby's heart rate dipped during that last contraction, just slightly, but enough that I want to watch it closely." Dr. Chen adjusted the monitors. "It could be nothing. Could just be positional. But if it happens again, we may need to consider intervention." Fear spiked through Mara. "Intervention? What kind of intervention?" "Let's not get ahead of ourselves. I'm going to monitor the next few contractions. If her heart rate stays stable, we proceed as planned. If it dips again, we discuss options." The doctor's tone was calm, professional. "Right now, both of you are doing fine. Let's keep it that way." But over the next hour, Isla's heart rate dipped 3 more times. Never dangerously low, but enough that Dr. Chen's expression grew progressively more concerned. Finally, she pulled Victor aside while a nurse stayed with Mara. "What's happening?" Mara called out, trying to see them through the doorway. Victor came back, his face carefully neutral. "Dr. Chen thinks we should consider a C-section. Isla's showing signs of distress, and the safest option is to get her out now rather than wait for natural progression." "No." Mara's response was immediate, visceral. "I've come this far. I can finish it." "Mara, I said no. I want to do this naturally. I want to deliver her the way we planned." She knew she was being irrational, knew the baby's safety should override her own desires. But after months of having every choice taken from her, this felt like the one thing she could still control. Dr. Chen stepped in, her voice gentle. "I understand wanting to avoid surgery, but we need to think about what's safest for the baby. The stress of continued labor could what? Hurt her? Kill her?" Mara felt tears streaming down her face. "Or is this just doctors being overly cautious because of who my ex-husband is? Because he's paying for the best care and everyone's terrified of something going wrong on their watch?" This has nothing to do with who's paying the bills, Dr. Chen said firmly. This has everything to do with keeping both of you safe. Your baby is showing signs of distress. Not critical yet, but trending in a concerning direction. We can wait another hour and reassess. But I need you to understand that if her heart rate continues to dip, we're out of time for choices. Victor knelt beside the bed, taking both of Mara's hands. Look at me. Just me. His eyes were steady, calm, despite the fear she could see underneath. What do you need? What would make you feel safe enough to make this decision? I need to know she's actually in danger. Not theoretical danger, not statistical possibility. Actual immediate danger that requires intervention right now. Mara's voice shook. I need to know this isn't just protocol. Dr. Chen pulled up the monitor, showing them the readouts. See these dips? They're occurring during contractions when the umbilical cord is compressed. Right now, she's recovering between contractions. But labor is intensifying. The compression is going to get worse, which means less oxygen getting to the baby for longer periods. Eventually, that causes damage we can't reverse. How long do we have to decide? I'd like to make a decision in the next 30 minutes. After that, we're pushing into dangerous territory. The doctor's expression was sympathetic but firm. I know this isn't the birth experience you wanted. I know surgery feels like failure after coming this far, but getting your daughter here safely is what matters. Everything else is just details. Mara closed her eyes, feeling another contraction building. She breathed through it, felt Isla's heartbeat dip on the monitor, felt Victor's hand tighten on hers. When it passed, she looked at him directly. What do you think? Honestly. Honestly, I think we've both spent months making impossible choices to keep her safe. I think we've survived separation and threats and fear to get to this moment. And I think the last thing either of us wants is to lose her now because we were too stubborn to accept help. His voice was rough with emotion. I want you both safe, Mara, however that happens. She studied his face, seeing the fear he was working so hard to control. The man who'd built an empire on never showing weakness was barely holding it together, terrified that the daughter he'd finally gotten a chance to meet might slip away before he could hold her. Okay, she whispered. Okay, do the C-section. Relief flooded Victor's expression. Dr. Chen immediately began coordinating with the surgical team, the room transforming into controlled chaos as nurses prepped equipment and anesthesiologists appeared to discuss epidural placement. You're making the right choice, Victor said, staying close while they worked around him. She's going to be perfect, and you're going to be fine. I promise. You can't promise that. You can't control this. Watch me. His smile was shaky but genuine. I've spent my whole life bending outcomes to my will. I'm not stopping now. They wheeled her into the operating room, a space so bright and sterile it felt otherworldly. Victor stayed by her head, still holding her hand, while Dr. Chen and her team worked behind the surgical drape. The anesthesiologist had numbed her from the chest down, leaving Mara aware but disconnected from what was happening to her body. Talk to me, she told Victor, needing distraction from the surreal situation. Tell me something, anything. What do you want to hear? Tell me about the future, about what happens when we take Isla home. She focused on his face, using it as an anchor. Tell me what our life looks like. Victor was quiet for a moment, and she could see him building the vision in his mind. We take her home to the house by the lake. You recover while I handle everything, the midnight feedings, the diaper changes, all of it. I probably do it wrong at first, but I learn. We both learn. And your organization? Marcus handles it. I stay home, stay present. When Isla's old enough to notice, I'm not the father who's always gone. I'm the one who's always there. His thumb stroked across her knuckles. I teach her to swim in the lake, to fish from the dock, to recognize different bird calls and track animal prints in the snow. That's very domestic for a crime boss. Former crime boss. By the time she's forming memories, that's not who I am anymore. I'm just dad. The guy who makes terrible pancakes and tells stories before bed and shows up to every school event. He smiled, and it reached his eyes for the first time in hours. I'm boring and predictable and there for every moment that matters. You'll hate being boring. I'll love being present. There's a difference. He leaned closer, his forehead nearly touching hers. And maybe, if you decide you can trust me again, we figure out what we are to each other. Co-parents who respect each other, friends who've survived impossible things together, or maybe, if we're really lucky, something more. You're still in love with me. It wasn't a question. I never stopped. Even when I hated you for lying, even when I thought I'd lost you forever, I never stopped loving you. His voice was barely above a whisper. I know we can't go back. I know too much has happened. But I'm hoping we can go forward, build something new from what's left. Mara felt tears slide down her temples. I never stopped either. That was the worst part. Loving you while knowing I couldn't be with you, missing you while understanding why I had to stay gone. We're not gone anymore. We're right here, about to meet our daughter. Victor kissed her forehead. Everything else, we figure out as we go. Mr. Hale? Doctor. Chen's voice cut through the moment. Would you like to meet your daughter? Victor's head snapped toward the surgical team, and Mara craned her neck trying to see. Then she heard it. A cry, thin and indignant, the most beautiful sound she'd ever heard. She's here, Victor breathed, his voice cracking with emotion. Mara, she's here, and she's crying, and she's perfect. A nurse appeared with a tiny bundle, placing her carefully in Victor's arms. He looked terrified and awed in equal measure. This man who'd commanded respect through violence, now reduced to trembling hands and tears streaming down his face. Isla Rose, he said softly, I'm your dad. I know we're just meeting, but I've been waiting for you my whole life. The baby's crying quieted, her unfocused eyes seeming to search for the source of the voice. Victor moved closer so Mara could see, and her breath caught at the sight of their daughter, tiny and perfect, with a shock of dark hair and Victor's nose. Her little fists waved in the air, already fighting against the blanket someone had wrapped her in. Strong, Mara thought, just like they'd both predicted. She's beautiful, Mara whispered. She's everything. Victor carefully maneuvered so Mara could touch their daughter, his hands shaking slightly as he supported Isla's weight. Look what we made. Look what survived everything we went through. Doctor. Chen was finishing the surgery, her team working efficiently to close the incision. 6 pounds, 2 ounces, she announced. Small for gestational age, but perfectly healthy. APGAR scores are excellent. She's going to need monitoring for the next 24 hours since she's technically premature, but I don't anticipate any complications. A nurse took Isla to conduct necessary tests, and Victor stayed with Mara while they completed the procedure and moved her to recovery. The epidural was wearing off, bringing awareness of the surgery site and exhaustion that seemed to reach her bones. Sleep, Victor said, settling into the chair beside her hospital bed. I'll stay here. I'll watch over both of you. You need rest too. I'll rest when I know you're both stable and safe. His tone left no room for argument. Close your eyes, Mara. Let yourself recover. I've got this. She wanted to protest, but exhaustion pulled her under. When she woke, late afternoon light streamed through the windows. Victor sat exactly where she'd left him, still dressed in the surgical scrubs they'd given him, dark circles under his eyes, but his expression peaceful as he held their sleeping daughter against his chest. How long was I out? Mara's voice was rough. About 6 hours. You needed it. He looked up, smiling softly. Isla's been perfect. Ate well, slept well, passed all her tests. The pediatrician says she's doing better than most premature babies. Strong, like her mother. Can I hold her? Victor carefully transferred their daughter to Mara's arms, helping her position Isla for skin-to-skin contact. The baby's weight was solid and real, her warmth seeping through Mara's hospital gown. She opened her eyes, dark blue like all newborns, and seemed to study Mara's face with serious concentration. Hi, baby girl, Mara whispered. I'm your mom. I know we've been together for 9 months, but this is the first time I get to actually see you. Isla made a small sound, her fingers curling around Mara's thumb with surprising strength. She knows you, Victor said quietly. I've been talking to her, telling her about you, about how brave you were, how hard you fought to keep her safe. She knows her mother is a fighter. We both fought for her. Mara looked up at him. You did this too. All of it. The transition, the changes, choosing to be here instead of running your empire. She's lucky to have you as a father. I'm the lucky one. I get to be part of this. I get to watch her grow up, be there for every moment. He settled back in his chair, his eyes never leaving Isla's face. I finalized some things while you were sleeping, signed papers officially transferring operational control to Marcus, with a timeline for my complete exit within 8 months. No more daily involvement, no more decision-making authority. I'm done. Mara's breath caught. Victor, you didn't have to. Yes, I did. I made promises, and I keep my promises. By Isla's first birthday, I'll be completely out. Marcus knows what he's doing. The organization will be fine without me. He met her eyes. But my family won't be fine without me actually being present. So I'm choosing presence every single time. 8 months is still a long time. It's necessary to prevent chaos. But during those 8 months, I'm working from home unless absolutely unavoidable. I'm here for feedings and diaper changes and the million tiny moments that add up to a childhood. His voice was firm. I'm not my father. I'm not Catherine. I'm going to be the parent who shows up. Tears slipped down Mara's cheeks. I believe you. Good. Because I need you to believe something else, too. Victor leaned forward, his expression serious. I love you. I've loved you since the day we met, through our marriage, through the divorce, through 6 months of thinking I'd lost you forever, and I'm going to keep loving you whether you can love me back or not. Victor, I'm not asking for anything. I'm not pressuring you to make decisions or promises you're not ready for. He reached out, gently touching Isla's tiny hand. I just need you to know that while we're figuring out how to co-parent, while we're building trust and deciding what we are to each other, my feelings aren't in question. They've never been in question. Mara looked down at their daughter, sleeping peacefully in her arms. This tiny human who'd survived threats and fear and impossible choices, who'd brought them back together despite everything working to keep them apart. I love you too, she heard herself say. I'm still angry about some things. I'm still scared about others. But I never stopped loving you, not even when I wanted to. Victor's expression transformed, hope and relief and joy all competing for space. Does that mean? It means we take this slow. We focus on Isla, on becoming the parent she deserves. We rebuild trust through actions instead of words. And maybe, eventually, we figure out if we can be partners again. Real partners, not just co-parents managing shared custody. Mara held his gaze, but only if you actually follow through on everything you've promised. Only if you prove that family really does come first. I will. Every day, every choice, every moment, I'll prove it. He stood, leaning down to kiss her forehead, then Isla's. We're going to make this work, all three of us together. The next few days in the hospital established new patterns. Victor stayed constantly, sleeping in the chair beside Mara's bed, learning to change diapers and swaddle properly and recognize Isla's different cries. He called his organization only when Marcus directly contacted him, and even then he kept the conversations brief and held Isla while he talked, a physical reminder of what mattered more. Mara watched him transform further with each passing hour. The ruthless operator disappeared, replaced by a father who researched sleep schedules obsessively and worried about whether Isla was eating enough. He was attentive and tender and completely devoted in a way that made Mara's heart ache with hope. I never thought I'd see you like this, she said on their third day in the hospital, watching Victor rock Isla and sing to her quietly, some lullaby he'd apparently memorized from a parenting book. Like what? Soft, gentle, completely wrapped around a 7-pound human's tiny finger. Mara smiled. It's a good look on you. She's easy to be gentle for. She's perfect. Victor looked up from Isla's face, and his expression made Mara's breath catch. You both are. My whole world right here in this room. They brought Isla home on a gray February morning, the sky threatening snow. Victor had transformed the house even further. Safety equipment installed everywhere, monitors in every room, the nursery stocked with everything they could possibly need. He carried Isla's car seat like it held precious cargo, refusing to let anyone else touch it until they were safely inside. Welcome home, little one, he said, carefully extracting their daughter from the car seat. This is where you live, where you'll grow up, where your mom and I are going to do our best not to screw you up too badly. Mara laughed despite her exhaustion. That's quite a welcome speech. Honesty's important. I want her to know we're going to make mistakes, but we'll always love her through them. He settled Isla in the expensive bassinet beside the bed, watching her sleep with an expression of complete devotion. She's going to be okay. We're all going to be okay. The first weeks were chaos, sleepless nights and constant feedings and learning Isla's rhythms. But they managed it together, falling into a partnership that felt natural despite their complicated history. Victor handled night feedings without complaint, walking Isla around the house at 3 a.m. while singing increasingly creative lullabies. Mara recovered from surgery slowly, accepting Victor's help with grace she'd never managed before. "You're good at this," she told him one night, watching him expertly burp Isla after a feeding. "Better than I expected. I read a lot of books, watched a lot of videos, asked a lot of embarrassing questions to pediatricians." He smiled down at their daughter. "I was terrified of being terrible at it, of being like my father, distant and unavailable. So I overprepared. It's working. You're a natural. I'm a dedicated student. There's a difference." Victor settled Isla back in her bassinet, turning to face Mara. "But I'm committed to learning, to being better, for both of you." True to his word, Victor's involvement with his organization decreased week by week. Marcus called less frequently. Security briefings became monthly instead of daily. Victor started spending mornings on the porch with coffee and Isla, afternoons in the nursery reading to her, even though she was too young to understand, evenings cooking dinner while Isla watched from her bouncer. "Marcus says the transition is going smoothly," he reported after one of his rare calls. "2 more months and I'll be completely clear. Just a consultant on paper, no real authority or involvement." How does that feel? Honestly, liberating. I thought I'd miss the power, the control, the feeling of running everything. But I don't. Not even a little. He looked at Isla sleeping in her bassinet. This matters more. Watching her discover her hands matters more. Making sure she feels safe matters more. Everything else is just noise. By Isla's 2-month birthday, Victor had been completely extracted from operational control. He still received quarterly financial reports from investments Marcus managed, but he had no say in organizational decisions. For the first time in 15 years, he was just a private citizen with a family. "It's strange," he admitted to Mara one evening. They sat on the porch together, Isla asleep in Mara's arms, watching the lake reflect sunset colors. "I defined myself by that world for so long. Now it's just gone. And I don't miss it at all." "What do you miss?" "Nothing. That's the strange part." He stretched out, more relaxed than she'd ever seen him. "I thought I'd feel empty without the power and the influence. Instead, I feel full. Like I finally found what I was supposed to be doing all along. Being a father? Being present. Being useful in ways that actually matter. Changing diapers and making bottles and protecting my family from real dangers, instead of playing power games with people who don't actually matter." He reached over, touching Isla's tiny hand. "She's taught me more in 2 months than I learned in 15 years of running an empire." Mara studied his face, seeing the truth there. This wasn't performance or temporary change. This was fundamental transformation, a man who'd discovered something more valuable than power and had the courage to choose it. "I want to try again," she said quietly. "Not just co-parenting, actually being together, being a family in every sense." Victor went very still. "Are you sure? I don't want you to feel pressured because we're living together or because I've been here for Itla. I'm sure because you've proven everything you promised. You stepped away from your organization. You've been present every single day. You've put us first in ways I didn't think you were capable of." She shifted Isla carefully, looking at Victor directly. "I'm still scared sometimes, still worried about whether this can last. But I'm ready to try if you are. I've been ready since the moment I saw you on that street in Seattle." His voice was rough with emotion. "I've been hoping you'd give us another chance. Give me another chance to be the partner you deserve." "Then let's do it. Not rushed, not because of external pressure, but because we both want this. Because we've built something real from the wreckage of what we lost." Mara reached for his hand. "We'll make mistakes. We'll have hard days. But we'll face them together instead of running from them." Victor pulled her close, careful not to wake Isla, and kissed her properly for the first time since they'd reunited. It was different from their early relationship, less desperate, more grounded, a kiss that promised presence instead of passion, partnership instead of possession. "I love you," he whispered against her lips. I love both of you more than I knew it was possible to love anything. I love you too. Imperfect and complicated, and exactly who we are right now. They sat together as the sun set completely, their daughter sleeping peacefully between them, the lake quiet in the gathering darkness. The world they'd left behind, the threats and the violence and the constant danger, felt impossibly distant. This was their reality now, this peace they'd fought for, this family they'd chosen, despite everything working against them. What do you want to do with the rest of your life? Mara asked eventually, now that you're not running a criminal empire? Honestly, I want to be boring. I want to coach Isla's soccer team when she's old enough. I want to teach her to fish and to read and to stand up for herself. I want to make you breakfast and argue about what to watch on TV and grow old knowing I made the right choice. He smiled. Maybe I'll take up woodworking like I joked about. Build furniture for the house. Be one of those suburban dads who's obsessed with their lawn. That sounds perfect. What about you? What do you want? I want to write. I always wanted to write, but never had time or headspace when we were married before. Now maybe I can. Stories, articles, maybe eventually a book. Mara looked down at Isla. I want her to see both her parents pursuing things that matter to them, building lives instead of empires. We can do that. We can build something worth having. Victor's hand found hers in the darkness. Together. 6 months later, Mara stood in the kitchen making Isla's bottle, while Victor did laundry and sang off key in the other room. Their daughter, now 8 months old and crawling everywhere, investigated the cabinet locks Victor had installed, determined to figure out how to defeat them. She's your daughter, Mara called to Victor, stubborn and convinced she can outsmart any security measure. She's brilliant, already problem-solving at 8 months. Victor appeared with a basket of clean baby clothes, dropping a kiss on Mara's head as he passed. Want me to take her while you make the bottle? Please, before she figures out how to open that cabinet and finds cleaning supplies. He scooped Isla up, tickling her belly until she laughed, a sound that still made Mara's heart swell every time she heard it. They'd settled into domesticity so completely it was hard to remember Victor had ever been anything other than this, a devoted father and partner who prioritized family above everything else. Marcus called earlier, Victor mentioned while Isla grabbed at his nose. Final paperwork is done. I'm officially removed from all organizational records. No financial ties, no consultancy agreements, nothing. Clean break. How do you feel about that? Relieved. It's finally over. That chapter of my life is completely closed. He looked at Mara seriously, which means this is the right time to ask you something I've been thinking about for months. What? He set Isla in her playpen, then turned back to Mara with an expression that made her pulse quicken. Marry me. Again. Not because of Isla or because we're living together or because it makes practical sense. Marry me because we've built something real. Because we've proven we can choose each other every day even when it's hard. Mara's breath caught. Victor, I know we've been through this before. I know the first time ended badly, but we're not those people anymore. We're better, stronger. We've survived things that should have destroyed us and came out choosing each other anyway. He took her hands. I want to make it official. I want Isla to grow up seeing parents who are committed not just to her, but to each other. I want to build a life with you that's based on honesty and presence instead of lies and absence. Tears spilled down Mara's cheeks. Yes. Yes, of course, yes. Victor pulled her close, kissing her with all the love and hope and promise of their complicated journey. Isla babbled from her playpen, apparently offering her approval of the proceedings. We'll do it small, Mara said when they broke apart. Just us and Isla, and maybe Thomas. No big ceremony, no press, just commitment. Perfect. I don't need spectacle. I just need you. Victor wiped tears from her cheeks gently. Both of you. My whole world right here. They married 3 weeks later on the dock behind their house, Isla in Mara's arms, while a local officiant spoke words about love and commitment and choosing each other. Thomas stood as witness, tears streaming down his usually stoic face. The ceremony took 15 minutes, but it meant everything. A promise made in full knowledge of what they'd survived, what they'd sacrificed, what they'd built together. I promise to choose you, Victor said when it was his turn for vows. Every day and every moment. I promise to be present and honest and the partner you deserve. I promise to put our family first, always. And I promise to keep proving I'm worthy of this gift you've given me, the chance to be your husband and Isla's father. I promise to trust you, Mara replied, her voice steady despite her tears. To believe in the man you've become, instead of fearing the man you were. I promise to build this life with you honestly, to face hard things together instead of running. And I promise to keep choosing you, even when it's complicated, because loving you has been the best decision I've ever made. They exchanged simple rings, kissed while Isla gurgled her approval, and walked back to the house as husband and wife for the second time. But this time felt different, earned, real. 2 years later, Mara stood on the same dock watching Isla toddle after ducks, while Victor hovered nervously nearby, ready to catch her if she got too close to the water. Ducks, Isla announced, pointing with the confidence of a 2-year-old who'd just learned the word and wanted everyone to know it. Yes, baby, those are ducks. Victor scooped her up before she could tumble into the lake. We watched ducks from a safe distance, remember? Safe distance, Isla repeated solemnly, then immediately tried to wiggle free to chase them anyway. Mara laughed, moving to help Victor contain their adventurous daughter. Life had settled into routines they'd never imagined back in those early desperate days. Victor had started his woodworking hobby and discovered he was actually good at it, creating custom furniture that filled their home. Mara had published her first article and was working on a book. Isla was growing into a force of nature, stubborn, brilliant, fearless in ways that terrified and delighted them both. I'm pregnant again, Mara said suddenly, the words tumbling out before she could overthink them. Victor froze mid-crouch, Isla squirming in his arms. What? I took a test this morning, actually 3 tests, all positive. She moved closer, touching his arm. Surprise! A grin spread across his face, transforming from shock to pure joy. We're having another baby? Apparently. Due in about 7 months, if my calculations are right. Mara watched his reaction carefully. Is that okay? I know we didn't plan this, and Isla's still so young. It's more than okay. It's perfect. He shifted Isla to one arm so he could pull Mara close with the other. Our family keeps growing. Our life keeps getting better. How could I be anything but thrilled? Isla, sensing the emotional moment, decided to contribute by smearing her sticky hands across both their faces. They laughed, untangling themselves to clean up their daughter, and Mara felt something settle in her chest. Peace. Real, lasting peace. This was what they'd fought for. This messy, complicated, perfectly imperfect life they'd built together. Victor had walked away from power and never looked back. Mara had learned to trust again, to believe in second chances and earned redemption. Together, they'd created something worth having, a family built on honesty, presence, and the daily choice to keep showing up for each other. I love you, she told Victor while he cleaned Isla's sticky fingers. I love this life we've made. I love who we've become. I love you too. Both of you. Soon to be all 3 of you. He kissed her gently, Isla giggling between them. Thank you for giving me this, for giving us another chance, for believing I could change. You did change. You chose to change. That's what made the difference. They walked back to the house together, Isla chattering about ducks and water and whatever else passed through her busy toddler mind. Inside, the furniture Victor had built filled rooms with warmth and history. Outside, the lake reflected afternoon sun, constant and peaceful. Mara looked at the family she'd fought so hard to protect, the man who'd proven love was stronger than power, the daughter who'd survived impossible odds to be here. Soon there would be another child, another person to love and protect and raise in this world they'd carved out from violence and fear. It wasn't the life she'd imagined when she'd married Victor the first time. It was better because it was real, earned through sacrifice and choice, and the courage to believe that people could change when they had reason enough to try. And as Victor settled Isla for her nap while discussing paint colors for the future nursery, Mara knew with absolute certainty that they'd made it. They'd survived everything meant to destroy them and had built something beautiful from the wreckage. This was redemption. Not promised, but proven. Not demanded, but earned. A second chance transformed into a lasting life through the daily decision to choose love over power, presence over control, family over everything else. And it was more than enough. It was everything.